I now call to order the regular session meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs on Tuesday, February 26, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. And roll call, please.
Mayor Alahouzes?
Here.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Here.
Commissioner Seaburn?
Here.
Commissioner Kikta?
Here.
Commissioner Carr?
Here.
Tonight's invocation will be given by Reverend Janet Natano from All Saints Episcopal Church. If you please stand and remain standing for the legible.
Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send down upon those who hold office in this city the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their office to promote the well-being of all people, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for coming in this raining weather. Thank you so much. We are now going to the public comments of the items that will not be discussed this evening. If you have any comments, please come forward, state your name and your address for the record, and you'll be given 4 minutes.
Robert Dockery, Innis Drive. Honorable Commissioners, I'd like to invite you all and invite the members of our community to visit the Oddfellows Lodge at 438 East Lemon Street. I'd like to invite you to come by March 14th, which is the second Thursday in March at 7 p.m., see how we've spruced up the building and the grounds, and to meet some of the new members, younger members that we have in the lodge. Some of you were there, some of the commissioners, I think there was at least one was there. A few years ago when we honored Mike Sackelson at the lodge for being a member for 60 years. Unfortunately, Mike is not with us anymore, but that speaks to the issue that the lodge has been having in recent years. The members have been aging, infirm, losing their ability to come to meetings, and the lodge has been kind of quiet, and it hasn't taken very much of a part in the local community. But the good part is, the good news is that we have new and energetic members, and they want to get out into the community. They want to work with the community and try to be more of a part of the community. In that regard, we have in the last couple of years funded through the Rotary Youth Trust 2 scholarships, and this year we're going to be awarding a 3rd scholarship to a young lady. Actually, it's day after tomorrow down at Countryside High, and that will have been the 3rd scholarship that the Tarpon Lodge 34 has sponsored. And we funded the Youth Trust so that the money could be given in the name of the Oddfellows to the students who were chosen. Another thing that we have recently raised money to help student activities at the schools, at our local schools. There's some of the members are interested in forming a shuffleboard team. I understand that that's kind of something that some of the younger people are interested in. Again, I thought it had kind of died out, but apparently not. And just in general, the people are interested in being a part of the community. There are a few members here. If they would stand up, you could, so the commissioners could see you. The lodge has been active for I figured about 127 years continuously in this community, and it probably rates as a local cultural institution for being around that long. And I would like to think that maybe 100 years from now, somebody will be standing up in a then commission and telling them about the Oddfellows Lodge. So we'd love to have you stop by on the 14th, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And I'm glad the organization's back again.
Do I need to sign in here too?
Yes, please.
David Bolton, 508 North Gross Avenue, Tarpon Springs, Florida. I just wanted to bring to the attention to the mayor, commissioners, and to the public that Pinellas County is updating their FEMA flood maps. And one of the benefits of being a part of Pinellas County is that we actually do our own maps, where almost every other section of the state is subject to FEMA. We actually have local people that understand our topography doing our maps. Pinellas County does have a website that you can go to, and you can actually do an overlay and see what you're rated right now, and then what you will be rated when the new maps become official, probably in 2020, maybe 2021. Especially if you're in Harbor Watch, if you're in Explorers Cove, or close to Fred Howard Park, Kenneth Way, along Florida and South Florida Avenue, River Watch. A lot of those properties that are currently AE will be going to X and benefiting greatly from this change in flood map. So I just want to encourage the public to watch for that. However, if you live in the Fruit Bowl and some of those areas, those AE flood zones will become a little bit larger. But our areas, the residential areas behind the Sponge Docks and Roosevelt back there that are on the hill, some of those that are AE will be going X. So just want to encourage you, maybe the city could put that on the website, put a link to it on our website that would help residents be able to go to that map and see where they're at, because some people are facing pretty hefty insurance bills and maybe thinking about selling, where if they can just hold out or scrape together enough to stay where they're at, they love their home, they might have some relief in just a year or two. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Peter Lacus, 514 Ashland Avenue. I don't know if anybody had a chance to go by the clerk's office today, but they're back in a bucket brigade, and this has been going on for years. We need to really fix the leaks that are going on in that building. But my purpose was to go and take a look at the financial reports of the candidates that are running for our city election. And one of the dismaying facts about this is there's really, even though they're public records and they're on file, the transparency is not there. There's no reason that those records cannot be scanned and put in an election file on the website for it's open to all viewing, instead of the process of going and having to knock on the clerk's, one of the clerk windows and get permission to come into the back to look at the records. And after going to 2 forums and hearing some of the comments by some of the candidates running, I was curious as to why they've either taken a particular position or have changed their positions. And it's interesting to find, and I am not trying to allege any wrongdoing, all these are open financial reports, but Mr. Archie has taken a couple $1,000 checks from construction companies in Orlando. And Commissioner Kitka has taken a $1,000 check from a landfill company in South Florida. There's a number of other interesting check donations by people out of our community who are trying to influence what's going on in Tarpon. So I say to you, if you have interest in what is truly going on behind the scenes, take a look and ask your representatives for the next election to have this information on file. Lastly, I did attend the meeting last night, and I want to correct and clarify some things that were stated that are not true. I've come before this board, and others have also, asking this board and this city to begin the application process for Florida Communities Trust Grant to purchase the Walmart property. As many of you may or may not know, the Wilkersons donated the out parcel to the city about a month or so ago, which is a footstep into this property. And it was stated at the commission meeting, two falsehoods. One, that we have to pay this back. First off, it's a grant. The way it works, we put up 25%, the state puts up the other 75%. It is a grant. It is money given to us. So if the property went for $6 million, we would put $1.5 million up, of which it's obvious we must have some of that money available because we bought a 50 by 100 something foot lot off the bayou where we could have used that money to buy 74 acres. And there are economic advantages to purchasing that property. I don't know if y'all saw the Parade magazine a few weeks ago, and maybe some of you are familiar with this, about the healing power of horses. When I spoke to y'all before about this, one of our options that we've discussed is using some of the upland for horse therapy. Other aspects I've mentioned to you is you have an issue with boat launching. There is room there for launching boats and parking. Thirdly, one of the major things we have talked about, and we haven't presented it to the board or to the city as much, but we have devised a plan where we would like to set up a disabled, and I don't want to use the word disabled, but disabled handicap challenge course, where there would be exercise stations and things throughout the park where those who are handicapped and disabled could come and take part in an exercise routine. I've mentioned other things that are possible, gondola rides from there down the docks. This property is invaluable to us. Yet many don't see the vision of the economic development that could be developed from this.
Mr. Delagas, if you please finish.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We don't need more concrete there.
Thank you. Any other public comments? I hear none. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a proclamation that Commissioner Carter is going to read on Procurement Service Month.
Thanks, Mayor. City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, proclamation. Whereas the public procurement profession plays a significant role in the efficiency, effectiveness of both government and business. And whereas, in addition to the purchase of goods and services, procurement adds value to the organization by performing functions such as executing, implementing, and administering contracts, developing strategic procurement strategies, and cultivating working relationships with suppliers and other departments within the organization. And whereas the Procurement Services Department in the City of Tarpon Springs recognizes, supports, and practices the public procurement values and guiding principles of accountability, ethics, impartiality, professionalism, service, and transparency, established by the Institute for Public Procurement, NIGP, as fundamental tenets of the public procurement profession. And whereas NIGP has proclaimed the month of March as Procurement Services Month to further expand the awareness of the procurement professional's role to government officials, the general public, business, and corporate leaders. Now, therefore, I, Commissioner Jacob Carr, by the virtue of the authority vested in the Mayor of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2019 as Procurement Services Month in the City of Tarpon Springs, and urge all citizens to join the City Commission in recognizing the role of the procurement and materials management profession within the business, industry, and government. I believe this is going to Jay. Is Jay here? Okay, great. Thank you for your service.
Jay, do you like to say a few words? Yeah.
First, I'd like to mention it was nice to see a fellow procurement professional read the proclamation tonight. And I'd like to thank the commission for all the support over the years, and to invite you all to our annual open house, which is going to be a week from Friday, across the street at Public Works. We have a mini trade show, hot dog cook-off, and door prizes. So please come. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an addendum proclamation on the Flood Awareness Week. Commissioner Hickley is going to read the proclamation.
Thank you. City of Tarpon Springs, Florida proclamation. Whereas the city of Tarpon Springs has experienced severe weather in the past in the form of extreme rainfall or tropical system events resulting in flooding in coastal areas, and this flooding has caused damage and flood losses to homes and buildings in all areas, whether they are high-risk special flood hazard areas or low to moderate risk flood zones. And whereas the city of Tarpon Springs is a voluntary participant in the National Flood Insurance Program that provides residents with the opportunity to protect themselves against flood loss through the purchase of flood insurance at reduced insurance premium rates, as well as setting higher regulatory standards to reduce the flood risk and potential flood damage to their property. And whereas the reduction of loss of life and property damage can be achieved when appropriate flood preparedness, control, and mitigation measures are taken before a flood. And whereas public education and awareness of potential weather hazards and methods of protection are critical to the health, safety, and welfare of residents of the Florida Floodplain Managers Association, have declared this week of March 11th through the 17th, 2019 as Flood Awareness Week to promote awareness and increase knowledge of flood risk, the availability of flood insurance, flood protection methods, and how to prepare for emergencies. Now, therefore, I, Commissioner Susan Kichter, by virtue of the authority vested in the mayor of the city of Tarpon Springs, Florida, do hereby proclaim the week of March 11th through 17th, 2019 as Flood Awareness Week. And I believe Kevin Powell.
Yep.
Kevin, you want to take it?
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you very much for this. As the gentleman was speaking during public comments about the flood maps, we do have a link on our webpage. We have a flood page on the building department website that goes to that with different information on there. That's part of our outreach. It's part of being in an NFIP. And as we try to lower our score, the outreach is one of the areas that we need to keep our score up in. We're currently a 7 within the city of Tarpon Springs, and with the current CRS audit that we just had, we provided additional information where we're going to try to lower that to a 6. I know I feel that's a direction that the commission wants us to go in by making it safer for our residents and lowering their flood insurance in special flood hazard areas. So we do have that information on our webpage, and it's very important that people will go there. There's a lot of information on there. That's where we do our outreach. Also through social media, we do our outreach, trying to get the information out to the citizens of Tarpon Springs and trying to promote a safer environment for them during times of flooding or bad weather events. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any commission comments on both the proclamations? No. Any public comments? Here none. Thank you. We now go to presentation item number 2, final design of Siqueira Cemetery expansion project. Mr. Smith.
Good evening, Paul Smith, Public Services Director, and tonight we're presenting the final design. After this presentation and any more input we receive, our goal is to bring that back and get those documents ready to go out to bid next month, or as soon as we can. With me here tonight is the lead designer, Thomas Burke from Cardno. Just in case there's any super detailed design questions that I can't answer, he's offered to be with me tonight. So by way of background here, there's not too many new things since the last time we spoke to you in July, but we realize this is a very important project for the community. We want to have one more opportunity for any input and before we go into that bidding process. So I'll talk briefly about the background, the site itself, the work we've completed to date, which has some additional things since last July, input that we received from our funeral service professionals, which was very helpful for us in our design, those updates that we talk about, a master site plan, the renderings for the Phase 2 mausoleum, which would be a future project, and then our proposed path forward, which includes the most recent schedule estimate. So by way of background, our goal with this is to maintain a variety of memorials and services for our community. And that's very important for the cemetery because we need to remain relevant, and that will allow us to have these options for the future and continue to grow that perpetual care fund, which is so important to help the cemetery sustain itself. The expansion site itself is located on the north side of Tarpon Avenue, just east of Jasmine, so it's right across Jasmine from the existing cemetery site. And what was really good about this site is that we had a city parcel next to it. We also had some city right away to the north. We were able to combine all of that and turn that 2.55 acres into just about 3.6 acres. And just to our north is a sports complex, which is strategic. I see in the future, if we had a really large funeral, it would be good to have that temporary additional parking and even access to safely get a long line of cars through there. So the work completed to date, as you know, we've purchased the land, we've done the site surveys, including the wetlands, the geotechnical soils, the survey itself. We also did some pre-design visits with our professionals to make sure they understood our goals and to make it in harmony with the existing cemetery. We did a complete evaluation of the trees. We had a meeting with the funeral service professionals I mentioned, and then we took all that and put it into our initial design that we reviewed back in July. Since that time, we've reviewed it with the city departments through our TRC process. We've gotten some input there. We've also demolished the abandoned barber shop on the property, and we're back tonight with that revised design to show it to you. The input from the professionals, the committal shelter was a great idea that was brought to our attention. In fact, it was so important that we recommended switching out. Originally, we had a restroom facility there and replacing it with the committal shelter. The thinking behind that is we do have restroom facilities already very nearby at the existing cemetery, and land is at a premium on this site, so we really wanted to focus it on uses that would go with that cemetery itself. So the committal shelter, it's commonly used in other types of cemeteries, including the VA type cemeteries, and we're proposing one of these as part of this project. The updates include a sidewalk. As part of the TRC requirements, we have to have a sidewalk from Tarpon Avenue north up to the entrance of the cemetery, so we're adding that. Also, we want to have a mid-block equipment crossing there. That's where the mowers could cross over safely from the existing cemetery to the new cemetery. And also, there's some modifications to the internal drive to enhance access. I do want to point out on this screen, in the upper right corner there, that's sort of what this new cemetery could look like in terms of, this is from Curlew Hills Cemetery, but what we like about this is there's headstones, above ground monuments, which is important to this community, but there's not the coping around them. So this allows the mowers to efficiently maintain it while still preserving the ability for an above ground monument. Here's the master site plan. Our latest estimate is 791 in-ground plots that would be available. 43 parking spaces, the committal shelter I talked about, and we're leaving space for that Phase 2 mausoleum. The access is off of Jasmine Avenue. There's a closed loop through the property. There's parking off to the side of the one-way loop there, and pedestrian circulation through the middle with a nice curved path through the trees. And all those circles there are trees that are preserved from the existing site. And I was just trying to skim through any more notes here. We're going to preserve the natural slope of the land and the existing wetland. We're going to work with that with some plantings along the entrance. And we want to maintain that wrought iron style perimeter fence with columns to be included. This last picture shows you the existing cemetery, the columns and the fence there. We really want to keep a sense of continuity with this new site. And what I mean is that to the average visitor coming up, we want it to be obvious that the right side of Jasmine is also a city property so that it looks like one cemetery. With that in mind, we're recommending the same style of fence and block and light on top of the columns on the other side as the current cemetery. So it appears from the road, oh, this is all one facility. Something about those blocks, they're integral color, which means they actually mix the pigment into the cement. So if you were to chip that column, it would still have that color, just like a brick would. So it's not a finish that'll peel or flake off or something. So we see this as an economical and long-lasting design, and we would propose putting LED lights on the top with a photo sensor similar to what we have now. This is the future mausoleum concept. It's very similar to the existing one in terms of design, with two buildings and a main archway through the main hallway through the middle, with a nice added feature of a covered circulation drive through the front, and also some sun shading on the south where the benches are. That's just another view of that same future mausoleum. And finally, the proposed schedule. So as I mentioned, we do have a conditional use change that I understand is procedural, but it'll be coming to you, I believe, next month as a board item. But we'd like to get started with the bidding shortly thereafter, sometime in April. And as schedules go, we would expect that we could start construction as early as July and possibly have the facility available for plots to be for sale within a year after that. So that concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to receive any questions or input.
Mr. Smith, thank you for the update.
All right.
Really, nothing has changed in design from the last time you presented to us. Talking to the residents, they have two concerns. One is they want to be able to have monuments on the graves, which you say they do. And the other concern that they have is want to make sure that they have faucets, water available to them so they can clean the monument. And I agree with you that the columns and the fences, it should be consistent, the same as the original Secure Cemetery. That way it looks like it's part of it. And I agree with that. But I don't think we have any more spaces left, do we, in the cemetery? So we got to hurry and get some of that right now, because
You're right, Mayor. Nothing immediately available. I have been told there are some possible spaces in the cemetery that haven't been plotted out yet in terms of like some possible available, but we would need to research that and survey it carefully. So yes, the short answer is you're right. Nothing available immediately in the current cemetery and ground.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And are there any commission comments? Commissioner Steve?
Thanks, Paul. It looks great. I guess the one change is the committal shelter, which is used in national cemeteries, and a lot of them have many committal shelters in them, which is a great area to have a service and gathering with family and friends. So I think it's great. I'm looking forward to the project starting, and as we all know, we need the space for
Thank you.
more. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, thank you for bringing this forward again, and it looks like from the last time you presented, everything really is the same. But I do like, I want to thank you for reaching out to our other funeral professionals in the area and getting their input, because that is really important to have their input. And this committal shelter I think is a great idea. So I want to thank you for that. I like the idea that we're finally getting sidewalks on Jasmine. We've been looking to put sidewalks for quite some time down there, so this is a great opportunity to do that. And and having the additional parking next door at the sports complex for a larger funeral is, will be helpful as well. So I think this is a very well thought out plan, and I do like that it will be consistent with, across from our cemetery now with the lighting and the fencing and everything. That is important, so it's consistent. But again, thank you for your work on this. Oh, could you just explain where the funding was coming from again?
Yes, thank you. The funding for this is coming from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, and this fund was established many years ago, and fees from the plot sales and also the services that we have get put into that fund for cemetery use. So one thing I can tell you, since I started with the city in 2000, that fund was about $39,000. It's now over $2 million. Wow. And I'm not going to say it's because of me, but I'm just saying I've seen it really grow because of the ability to put that back into that fund. It's very important to do that.
Yeah, that's just a great idea. Great thinking again on your part. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I do want to manage expectations a little bit on the Jasmine sidewalk. This project will only take it maybe 300 feet, Tom, up to the entrance of the cemetery. The rest of it will need to be a future project. Okay. And I can tell you, when we looked at that corridor, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. There's a big elevation drop, and it's kind of a narrow area. But I've been talking to Tom about ideas, and I'm sure he'll be working on something.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carr?
Thanks, Mayor. Paul, thanks for the update. And while we're on the sidewalks, I support the sidewalk from going from Tarpon Avenue to the beginning of the sports complex. So I would like the city manager to note it. And I know we've asked in the past meetings to figure out how we can put a sidewalk on there. We've gotten some pushback from Tom in the past saying it is challenging, but this is one of our sports complexes where our children play. And we need at least a safe pedestrian walking area in the event someone has to take the bus to the sports field or something along those lines, because cars speed up and down that road pretty heavily. Paul, can you touch base real quick about the crosswalk that goes across Jasmine? Are we going to have some placards out there or a beacon of some sort? And then will it take the people visiting the cemetery to the other side of the cemetery where they could use the restrooms?
Yes, good questions. So the plan is to keep our office at the existing cemetery site. It's just not efficient to use up that new site for a building and then have staff sitting over there, two places. So it really has to work that way. What we plan to do is primarily take customers over to the new site to show them things or whatever. If they don't park there already, we could take them in a vehicle out. We have a back exit out by Mellon Street and Jasmine. So it'd be a safe way for us to drive, take a right turn, and then enter the new cemetery with a vehicle. There is going to be a crosswalk. We call it a mid-block crossing, so that staff could bring tractors, mowers, and those sorts of things safely across into the new cemetery entrance. And we will have some flashing LED signs. Our idea is to have them activated at the site there, just like Safford. Very similar type thing to really get people's attention. They'd only be on when you're using them, so that it would really alert people and be, very noticeable. As far as people getting back out again, it would be simply a left there and then a right at the light on Tarpon Avenue to go back. So I think it'll be a pretty good way to get around, and we'll minimize the use of that crosswalk to mainly equipment.
So are they going to be able to cross the street with the crosswalk and go into the other side of the cemetery to go to the bathrooms?
Yes.
And use the facilities? Okay.
Well, that I would recommend by car. I would recommend that in a vehicle going back out over to the new cemetery, but it'd be a very short 1 minute trip.
I suppose we should probably have some type of signage in the communal shelter that addresses that, so people are aware of that during the services. A couple things I want to talk about too. Talked about the sidewalk. I would like to encourage some type of hedge, and I've talked about this with the current cemetery where we're at today, is a current hedge around the fence as well, because if you're at a cemetery gravesite when a service is going on, or if you're there visiting a loved one's gravesite, I think you don't want to really be distracted by the passing cars or vehicle traffic that's going by. Although you could see through the fence and see the grave sites that are there, but if you're there visiting, it should be a peaceful time to where you don't have vehicle traveling at high speeds, being a distraction and so on. So, as I mentioned before, I think it would be a good idea to do a hedge on the inside part of the fence. I do agree that the fence should look the same as on the other side, but I would also ask that we should update, I think, the stones that are on that block, the block that you talked about. I believe there's some type of brick at the entrance, but the stone that was used for the columns are like a pink color, and I don't think that represents really the character and the history of our nationally historically registered cemetery. So with that, I mean, I would ask that you would look at what it would cost to update it to brick and to keep that historic look across the street as well. Because I do feel that it was the wrong choice of product when the fence was initially installed. I understand the concept and it makes sense from a maintenance standpoint, but overall, a pink concrete block is not fitting for a historic site, I don't feel. So I'd like to ask the staff to go back and look at what we could do from a brick standpoint to keep the history and the culture and the character of the area. Other than that, I think you've done a great job with the design, and thank you for bringing it back forward. Thanks.
Thank you. We now go into the public comments on this item. Any public comments on this item? Here none. Thank you, Mr. Smith. We now go into the consent agenda. Number 3 is the minutes, December 4th, 2018, regular session. B is December 11th, 2018, regular session. C is January 8th, 2019, regular session. D is January 22nd, 2019, regular session. And E is February 12th, 2019, regular session. Number 4 is the attorney fees, Trask Adinal, invoice 57,683. B is Johnson & Jackson, invoice 3968 and 3985. Number 5 is special events. A, Garden Club, Plant Sale, March 30th, 2019. B is the Sponge Docks Arts and Crafts Show, April 13 and 14, 2019. 6 is the award file number 190071 and CM, single source purchase of Ford Original Equipment Manufacturer automobile parts and services. Number 7 is to approve correction of errors on the original agenda item, file number 190068 NCM, single source purchase of HVAC Delta control maintenance and retrofit services. Number 8 is file number 190001 NRS CAD, RMS, and miscellaneous services. Number 9 is authorized execution of interlocal agreement with Pinellas County for funding of Enclo River dredging. And I'd like to pull item number 9. Any other items that you'd like to pull? 3? Okay.
8.
Huh?
8. Just
8.
before 9.
Just 8? Okay, thank you. So we pull 9 and 8. Any comments on those items? 3 through 7. Are there any public comments of the items 3 or 7? I hear none. I need a motion.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. To go in order, let's do item number 8 first, is to increase file 190001 NRS CAD RMS and miscellaneous services. Commissioner Carr.
This is a little bit different than, but I just had a question for Chief or maybe our attorney. It says we're increasing this because of the triple homicide that occurred over on the other side of Anklet River earlier, or sometime last year, or I guess the beginning of this year. Is there a way to put the cost of the investigation back to the suspect that was admitted guilt in this aspect, to where we put the cost on the individual, to where the city doesn't front all the costs of the investigation? Or I've never seen this extension here before, so.
Well, first we need the contract increase so we can pay the bill. This is a major homicide case that, we budget what we think we need for the year in forensic services, and this is just way beyond what is normal. So we need the money to pay for the remaining year. You can always ask for restitution from the suspect in this case. He hasn't been convicted yet. He's been indicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder. You'll never get it. He's indigent, poor, and he'll be put, most likely, if he's found guilty, in prison for the rest of his life. So, I mean, we could look at that, but I don't think you'd ever recover any of this money back from him.
I mean, I'm in favor of increasing this, but at some point I think we should probably look at trying to recover something, or at least putting the restitution out on the individual as a secondary. I mean, we had to put a lot of resources in it. A lot of families were obviously impacted by this. So if we get it back or not, it's still probably just a process that we need to go forward and look at least vetting out to see if it's a good idea or not. So thank you.
Any commission comments on item number 8? Any public comments on item number 8? Here none, I need a motion for number 8.
Approved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Can I just clarify, the motion is just to approve it as is?
As is.
Thank you. Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes. I'll pull item number 9, which is to authorize execution of interlocal agreement with Pinellas County for funding of Anclo River dredge. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Licouris for an update.
Yes, you have the newest copy. We've been working on this. Obviously, we do not want to wait to the March 19th meeting to address this. And we've been trying to get the county attorney and their risk management. Obviously, this is getting money for them, so we need their input. We're pretty sure this is the final document. What I want you to do tonight is to approve this document, but with a contingency that if there's some little minor changes, because I understand risk management for the county still hasn't reviewed it. If there are minor, non-substantive, that you approve this with the ability of the city attorney to approve any small language changes. Again, the purpose of this is to not stall the design of the dredge project. As you all know, when we had everything going on with the government shutdown, the main money for the main dredge went, and I told all of you we're still good because they are still going forward with the funding of the design with their money. We haven't had to draw on that money. In fact, this is money we were hoping they wouldn't draw from, so we'd use this money to help with the area that we have to do a separate dredge on of our other area. That's what we were hoping for. Obviously, when Bob Robertson got the call that, oh, by the way, we just lost the money and we'll have to stop the design process because we lost that money too, we had this contingency. As you know, Commissioner Bathurst said, we've tried to have contingencies for everything up until the final dredge. This is it. So we notified the county we need to draw down this money. We need to get this to the Army Corps so the process continues for the design process for the dredge. So that's the money it was originally going for. Again, we had hoped that they were going to design it with their monies and we'd have this money for the additional portion we have to do, but to keep things going and to not stop the progress. And hopefully by the time it gets designed, we'll have the money placed back in for the dredge. I'm asking you to approve this again with if there are some minor changes from the county that have no substantive value to it, that they make those changes and we can get that money to the Army Corps to keep this process going.
Thank you. Just an information to everyone. Dredging the Anclo River, which is one of the most important projects that we have going on right now. We getting funding from all levels. Of course, we started from the city of Tarpon Springs, then the county, the state, and the federal government. $300,000 are coming from the state, and this is what we're talking about today.
County.
I mean, Pinellas County. Any commission comment?
Am I okay?
Sure.
Quick question about this. This is something that was already committed by the county. Didn't the county pay for the study also, the economic study as well, or did the city front that? Is that remember? The city did.
City paid for it.
Okay. And this is the initial commitment that the county
Initial
committed.
commitment that we haven't had to draw on because the Army Corps has been designing it on their own dollar, so we haven't
Okay.
had to draw on it until we got the notice that they're gonna need to draw on it or they would halt the process.
Yeah, I remember also talking to Commissioner Eggers at one of the parades, I think the Christmas parade, I believe it was, about if we needed help, any additional help, to reach out to the commission about it. So the additional turning basin, I suppose, this might be an opportunity to reach out to the county to further, and also if we need to talk to Senator Hooper for the state senate and Representative Sprawls about that as well. I mean, we might be able to get some additional relief there instead of using city funds.
Mr. LaCourse, do we have any updates from the Army Corps of Engineers on the federal?
We don't, but again, hopefully by maybe the 19th, Bob Robertson couldn't be here tonight. Maybe the 19th meeting. I'll ask him if we got it, and we'll give an update at the 19th meeting. Yes, yes, because he's got a couple other things on the agenda that night. So
thank you. Any other commission comments? Commissioner Dick?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that 3 years ago, I had approached Commissioner Long and Commissioner Charlie Justice, county commissioners, and this is where the money came from. I had reached, and Rhea, you were there with me that night. We reached, and this was 3 years ago that we talked to them about it. We set up a meeting with them and some of the people from the Marine Commerce Committee, or they were, and well, whatever, they did a little side thing, whatever, but they got together and discussed with the county commissioners how important it was that, you know, is there any funds that they could give us. So this was the start. Again, this was 3 years ago. So, you know, everything that happens is a process. Unfortunately, it's taken this long for us to even get this far. So hopefully the dredge isn't going to, you know, drag on like this has dragged on. But I'm thankful that they agreed to fund $300,000 for this start of the project. So, and hopefully they will listen if we need more funds. They know the importance of the dredge to us, and you know, we have an active working waterfront, and these commissioners know how important it is. You know, it's been years since we've had any representation from our county commissioners, and we finally, in the past at least 3 years, they understand. We've invited them to come up. We've taken them through town, and they understand Tarpon Springs. So they're giving us a little hope here that they won't forget us, because we are the forgotten child most of the time. So I hope that they continue to be active in our community. Thank you.
Well, I just want to remind everyone that during the county budget sessions, the Marine Commerce and us, we went there, we did a presentation, and we made our case. That's when the money was actually budgeted. And I want to express my thanks to the Marine Commerce for the work that they did. And they were very instrumental in getting funding for dredge. Any other comments?
Sure, I just wanted to add to what Commissioner Kitka said. Obviously, I agree with everything you said, and I did attend a county commission meeting along with Karen Lemons to ask for that money way back then. So yes, I'm happy that we're finally at this point where we're going to get the funds and be able to move this project forward. But yeah, I think our county commissioners, this board on that county of commissioners has really changed from some of the previous boards as far as recognizing Tarpon Springs and working with us. And I have a pretty good relationship with all of them. So I want to thank them too.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I know it seems like we got you know, so far with this, and then this got taken from us. I'm still hoping that I guess the government's operation or what have you, that they will fund these, I guess, level 3 and 4 projects, as they call them. As you know, I have one meeting left. My ability to help with this is diminished, but I just encourage the future board to keep this on the forefront. I know it's not always the you know, sexiest thing, but I think it really is one of the main pillars of Tarpon Springs, and if that falls, I think it's going to be detrimental. So we have to keep on it, and very thankful to our county commissioners, as was said tonight. When it started with, they were going to use the money from the BP spill, and then they later decided I think I forgot where they budgeted from, but they promised us these funds, and it's kind of odd that exactly 3 years later that we're having to use them. So hopefully things will turn around, but please don't forget about the dredge and keep it on the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comments on this item? Is there any public comments on this item? Hear none? Thank you. I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
And just for clarification, is it a motion to approve with the condition that if there's any minor non-substantive changes, that can be approved by the city attorney's office?
Yes, correct.
And second to that amended motion?
Yes.
The chair will entertain the motion. We already did, so I need a roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther? Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. Next is item number 10. Settlement of a code enforcement lien, case number 17-8000004, 35-724 North Avenue. City Attorney, if you please present this item.
Yes, the city attorney's office is requesting authorization to accept $1,300 for settlement, a settlement offer from the Federal National Mortgage Association, or FNMA, who is the new owner of the property at 724 North Avenue. This property had a code enforcement board lien on it that was placed there November 27th of 2017. However, due to the prior property owner going through a foreclosure, the bank foreclosure wiped out the prior lien. However, when the bank took title to the property in July of 2018, the property was still not in compliance. When it was finally brought into compliance on July 31st, the violation had existed for 26 days. The Code Enforcement Board previously had ruled that there would be a $50 daily fine. So for the 26 days that the new property owner owned the property, amounts to $1,300. The bank has offered that in exchange for a partial release, meaning that we would release the bank as far as the lien is concerned, but we would still retain the right to go after the previous property owner who was the initial violator on the property. So the city attorney's office is recommending that we settle this Code Enforcement Board lien for $1,300.
Any commission comment? Any public comments on this item? Hear none? The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes. Next is item number 11, settlement of code enforcement lien, case number 09800000443, 11-000268. This is located on the 1400 Boyne-Seton Avenue. City Attorney, please read present this item.
Yes, the city attorney's office is asking for authority to accept a $20,000 settlement from attorney Barbara Hall on behalf of the current owner of 1400 Poinsettia Avenue, which is Resi Rio Sub LLC, in exchange for a release of the Code Enforcement Board lien as to one code case, which is the 2017 case, and then a partial release of liens for the 2009 and 2011 cases. The partial release would be the same as the last, that we would retain the right to go after the previous property owner who was the initial violator for those two code cases. The 2017 code enforcement fine is about $26,000, but to avoid incurring any additional attorney's fees or court costs, it's recommended that we settle this code enforcement case for $20,000. And I can answer any questions that you have.
Commission comments? Is there any public comments on this item? Hear none? I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes. Next is item number 12, to approve a memorial plaque for a Little League field. Mr. Licura, staff report.
Yes, this was a request received from the family of Miss Faye Ragsdale, who just recently passed away. The request is to have a memorial plaque. I know we've dealt with a lot of things before, naming rooms, naming building. This is a little bit different. This is for a memorial plaque. For Miss Ragsdale, obviously, since I coached in 4 different decades in Little League, I know of Miss Ragsdale and know of the contributions she made in youth, not only there in youth football, but youth baseball, and she's pretty much, in my mind, remembered for the baseball. So that's why Sisler Field would be an appropriate place to put the plaque. We really don't have a procedure, so that's why I'm just bringing this forward to the board. It was brought to me by her son-in-law, Mr. Candinas, her daughter Anna. They're here, longtime residents and members of this community and stuff. You see attached the sample of the language, which would have to be approved by the city. You see the relative size with the picture on it. And what we would do is prove that and place it on a building or somewhere at the Little League complex, and have that done. The family, as in other things like this, a donating, they will be paying for this, but the city will install it on the building. And again, we look back to try to find some set procedures on it. There isn't any, so I'm just bringing it before you for consideration and approval to do.
Well, thank you, Mr. LaCourtis. I also know Ms. Ragsdale for many, many years. She coached my 3 boys. She was a terrific person. Did we get any feedback from Little League board?
No.
Okay, I wonder.
There are buildings, and
Yeah, I know
we
it's
would put
our
them on
building,
ours.
but have we talked to them at all?
No. I don't know if anybody on that board would.
Okay. Any commission comment?
No, I just feel it's city property, so I think it should be our decision. And I just want to say, she sounds, I was reading all about Miss Ragsdale, and sounds like an amazing woman. She really was involved in sports in the community, and I think it's a great idea.
Yes, I think many kids learn a lot from her. She was a role model to many kids, including my 3 boys.
Yeah, I remember. Thank you. I remember Miss Ragsdale as well, playing Little League for many years, and she was a staple. That she was always there, constantly. So it didn't matter what game or what time of night the game was over, she was around and she was a part of it. So I think it's a great way to honor someone that had so much history here in Tarpon and gave so much of her life to the children of Tarpon Springs. So thank you for being willing to bring this forward, and I'm happy to support this. And then in her honor and dedication to our city.
Thank you. Any public comments on this item? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, she sounded like an amazing woman. I didn't know her, but yes, thank you for bringing this forward. She was definitely such an involved person and loved children, and I love this last statement here, always believing every child deserves the opportunity to succeed. And that gives me goosebumps because I truly believe that. So thank you again, and I think we'll be honored.
Okay, we're now going to the public comment. Mr. Candinas, you want to tell us anything? I know you've been waiting for that.
I thank y'all very much for this. This means a lot. Means a real lot. She was a great lady, and I'm sure she's happy for that. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Jerry. Vaquiotis?
Yeah, Costa Vaticiotis, 538 West Cedar Street, Tarpon Springs. Ms. Ragdale was after my time. I had other people that were involved in the Little League when we were younger, and actually when we first got the Little League started. And but she's very much a legend and a hero, and there's always people like that have to keep things going. So I very much appreciate. It looks like it's going to pass, and I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? I hear none. I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Yep.
And roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Seaver?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Candinas, thank you for bringing it forward. Next is item number 13, Resolution 2019-04, reorganization of the Cemetery Division. City Attorney, if you please read the resolution.
Resolution number 2019-04, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, authorizing phase changes in the organization of cemetery operations within the Public Services Department, specifically including upgrading positions, adding a cemetery service worker position, revising position descriptions, and providing for an effective date hereof.
Thank you. Staff report.
Good evening, Paul Smith, Public Services Director. As we presented before, there's a lot of things coming up at the cemetery, and we've also had another major event. Our top position of leadership at the cemetery has recently retired. There was going to be a plan I was going to bring forward to you for reorganizing to address this upcoming expansion and address our evolving needs at the cemetery, and this most recent event has triggered me to come before you here and ask for your approval tonight of a phased plan. The phased plan would address the immediate need of the leadership at the cemetery that's been since vacated, and also to go ahead and address in a phased manner. With your approval, the city manager could authorize that second phase upon the expansion being imminent, and I'll just briefly give you an overview of what's being proposed. The immediate change, I recommend upgrading that vacant cemetery lead operator position, which is currently a wage grade 15, to a cemetery supervisor, which is a wage grade 18. This will put the required skills in place to administer cemetery operations and plan, prepare policies, and perform customer and sales assistance for the new area. The next phase of the plan would occur sometime in fiscal year 2020. As we near the opening of the cemetery expansion, I would propose to upgrade the cemetery assistant operator position, currently a wage grade 12, to cemetery lead operator, which is a wage grade 15. This will allow the maintenance and grounds functions of the cemetery to be completed with limited direction from the supervisor, providing more time for that supervisor to focus on the remaining administrative aspects of the cemetery. I'm also recommending upgrading the laborer 2 customer service position, wage grade 7, to a cemetery service worker, which is a wage grade 10. This position is expected to perform specialized services in addition to grounds maintenance, including customer service, plot location, funeral assistance, and acting in the capacity of the supervisor when required. And it also provides the opportunity for succession planning. And finally, I recommend adding a position of the cemetery service worker, wage grade 10, to perform maintenance services as part of the expanded duties of the cemetery. I'm proposing the funding for this to come partially from those service fee revenues that we get at the cemetery every year. That would go to largely offset the estimated $40,000 per year additional cost for all of these changes. That's my presentation on this item.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. And I want to thank you for taking the time and discussing your organizational plans with me a couple of days ago. Any commission comment?
Thanks. I've just got a quick question where it talks about contract maintenance. I know we have a contract with a grass cutting company that comes out and mows the common areas. I see it's going to reduce. Am I reading that correctly in this?
Yes, what I'm trying to show with that org chart is that with that extra position coming on, we use that contract service as sort of a peaking type function. So when the grass is growing very quickly in the summertime and we can't quite keep up, this sort of offsets that additional need just so we can maintain a level of maintenance. With that additional position, I'm projecting that we won't need quite as much of that peaking type assistance.
Okay. So am I right to assume that's less cost then for the city?
I think
Contract
overall,
services?
you're still going to have a higher maintenance cost because you have a larger area now to maintain. So,
Okay.
But I've factored that into my funding estimate there.
Okay. Thanks for explaining this to me also last week. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You reaching out.
Yes. Thank you also for reaching out to me. Is that Dave, the position that retired?
Dave Witkowski retired. Yes, he's been a great employee. We've really appreciated his service.
He
and
was an amazing man. And,
yes, very good with the customers. I would often tell him one of my measures of the effectiveness of the leadership out there is how many phone calls come to my office, and not very many did. And I think that's meaning that he really took care of the customers out there.
Cared about Tarpon, too. Unfortunately, I was out of town for his little party. But yes, I definitely think that this is a great thinking forward and being proactive with the additional property we're going to be maintaining. This organization is going to be good. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on this item? Here none. Need a motion
Motion to approve.
Second.
and roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. Next is item number 14, the ordinance 2019-05, use of recreation facilities. This is the first reading. City Attorney, please read the ordinance.
Ordinance 2019-05, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending Chapter 12.5 Parks and Recreation, Article 1 in general, Section 12.5-6, deleting the recreation card requirement and requiring a franchise or license agreement for commercial activity on public land and use of city parks, providing for repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance. The second reading will be held on March 19th, 2019, and will be published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on March 8th, 2019.
Staff report.
Good evening, Paul Smith. I think this rounds out my podium time for this evening, I think. What's prompting us to bring this to you is the pertinent ordinance on this area. It goes back to 1983. And there really isn't a means to regulate commercial activity in parks particularly, and this also references city vacant land, or city land. But what we find is happening is there's a lot of these pop-up type classes happening in our parks where maybe there's a yoga instructor that decides to pull a group of people together, paid participants, and have their own class, and we never know about it. You may ask, well, what's wrong with that? Well, part of the problem is without us being aware of what's going on, it could conflict with our programs that we're having. It could have liability issues associated with the use, and the surrounding neighbors may not be agreeable to what's going on. So for all of those reasons, this ordinance isn't trying to eliminate commercial use. It's just putting in a process for us to be on top of it, regulate it, and get approvals from you all where it's appropriate. As part of updating this, there was also an antiquated section that spoke to recreation cards. The fees are out of date. So after speaking with Craig, who's here in the audience tonight with me, our recreation superintendent, he says, you know, we really don't want to discourage individuals using our tennis courts, even if they're not in the city. You know, we don't always get a lot of use, and seems like we want to promote more active use of our parks. That's a very difficult thing to enforce. You know, for our staff to be driving around facilities interviewing tennis players to see if they have cards, you know, I don't really think that was what was the original vision. So because of those reasons, we're recommending to eliminate that part. We'd still have the recreation card, but it'd be mostly used for using the community center gym, basketball courts, and those types of things. And that's much easier for the staff to enforce because they're there on site. That pretty well summarizes what we're proposing to you. I can tell you that our attorney's office works a lot with this, with Dunedin, and they were part of writing this. We thought it important to give you a process that works, that is working somewhere else nearby. And that's all I have on this item.
Mr. Smith, tell us, if an organization was to use the park to do an exercise, what is the process? What do you expect them to do?
Well, there's several options. They could be part of our city program, which we would like to do that, coordinate with instructors so the recreation division can have an overall programming plan, so they could become a contract instructor with the city. Another way they could do it is through a franchise agreement that we would bring to you all as a board and get approval for a set period of time, say 1 to 2 years. And then the third option would be if they wanted to do something as part of a special event process, then they would get a permit to do that. And I'm speaking more to vendors and food type things. That's more where that example would come into play. But 3 main ways to do it.
Okay, thank you. Any Commissioner? Yeah. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks, Mayor, for asking that question. I had the same one. But who's going to enforce this if you see like a yoga class happening, or if they're just friends doing yoga, or if it's an exercise boot camp or something along those lines?
Well, our first choice would be our recreation staff, and we would have with this ordinance something to point to and a basis. But if we had a repeated problem, we would ask for the help of our police department, and a trespass warning would be the next step. Craig spoke with his counterparts in Dunedin, and I understand they don't really have to use that very often, so apparently just the fact that there's an ordinance in place and that staff can approach somebody seems to be working in its own way.
Okay. I've got a question on how we approach, like, for instance, if we have a class that's in session, would staff approach in the middle of the class and stop it? Because I think that would be kind of an embarrassing situation for the business owner or whoever it may be. And is there a warning process that falls into play here, or how would that work, out of curiosity?
I think we've got some leeway on how we do that, and certainly we don't want to create new problems. I think all we want to do is accomplish the goal of being in the process. So I'm sure Craig could work with his staff and do it at in the appropriate way at the right time, but get the message across, hand them a copy of the ordinance, give them instructions on how to do it the right way.
Okay. And then I suppose the last one would be, are we going to proactively go and to the businesses that we think are maybe using the city's property, or just announce it to the businesses that are currently here in Tarpon Springs, just to let them know that there's an ordinance in place, similar to what the shopping carts were with those businesses, so we notify them, and they're put on notice, I suppose, and then maybe we could get them, because obviously if you could advertise a yoga class through the recreation, they're going to get a lot more publicity about their class than it would if they just did it by themselves, or a boot camp or something along those lines as well too. So it should help a small business owner, I would think, too, in that effort. So
good point.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I think that this ordinance will help, and it's also a big liability for the city if something happens in one of these classes. So we have something now to show that, you know, this is the responsibility of the person running these classes. I would suggest, as far as letting people know, that we include it on our website, so that people are aware that there's an ordinance for any type of activities in our public park. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any public comments on this item? Yes. If you please state your name and your address for the record to begin.
Good evening. My name is Austin Berry. I reside at 444 Oakview Terrace in Palm Harbor. So I'm currently a student at St. Petersburg College in the Public Policy and Administration program. So today I was talking with Paul Smith about the current ordinance that's up there. And so after meeting with him and speaking with some of the local residences and trying to gain some perspectives on what to do for a case study in this situation, I had some inquiries about thinking about what this could happen. So how would this encouragement of recreational park usage, how would that help that? Also, how would this better enforce the recreational cards that's there, as well as how the new licenses, sort of how it was already brought up, and as well as what would the stages of inquiry be for the new licenses agreement. So those were some inquiries that I had. After reviewing the issue, meeting with some of the stakeholders that will be in there, as well as gathering their perspectives and meeting with an expert, such as Paul Smith, thank you again, I was able to formulate a recommendation on the matter. So I recommend that the city does adopt this ordinance. I believe that modeling the current system that is used in the city of Dunedin would help the city in the process of establishing this ordinance and better secure what needs to be done. I believe that this resolution would also remove some outdated language from the city code of ordinances that's in there. It would make it very easy for the current residents to use the city parks and outdoor recreation areas, rather than having to show a card like they have to do now in case someone's asking them about it. As well as this would make it for other residences that aren't really in the city but might be outside of the city to come by and enjoy the city areas. This might help with tourism in some areas where they can come and enjoy the sponge docks, as well as maybe take a walk in the park and not have to be asked to leave the park just because they're trying to walk in it or something like that. So I think this will greatly help the city of Tarpon Springs promoting a healthy, safe, happy area. Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time to come here from the school. Thanks.
David Bolton, 508 North Gross Avenue, Tarpon Springs, Florida. I just had a couple questions when this came up. That it only applies, number one, to commercial uses of the park. So our nonprofits that might, like Peace for Tarpon, that might have an event that's just not exceeding the use that the park is designed for. So there's no, they don't have to put, portalettes or anything like that out. If they're not exceeding the size of the park and they have a group meeting, how is that any different than like a birthday party that would not need one, or a Bible study from a local church that wants to meet on Tuesday nights, or Tuesday afternoons, and there's a group of 10 or 15? Did they have to get how does that play? And then we've talked about liability of people having people in the park. Is there really liability, or are we just saying they're liability, or how is the city liable if we already have insurance? That I was wondering about that. And then is that also deal with the boat ramp if we have somebody that has a business that rents kayaks and stuff, but they meet people at the boat ramp and launch 10 or 15 kayaks at one time? Did they also have to get a permit? So just think this through of all the different people that might be implicated in having to get permits and how that's going to work, because it might not be quite as simple as we think, and we don't want to discourage our small businesses. It's very important to see how this is going to affect small businesses, because Tarpon is, most of our businesses are small businesses, and I just want to make sure we're thinking about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton.
Hello, my name is Tagashira, and I live in St. Petersburg. I'm a student of St. Petersburg College as well. And thanks for allowing me to speak here. I strongly agree with the ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs to delete recreation course requirements and opting to the requirement of license agreement for commercial activities in the City of Tarpon Springs. This is because the license and franchise requirement will enhance the protection of the natural surroundings of the city and take into account the commercial activities across the city. In addition, the supervision and management of the city is very key, especially when taking into account the protection of the usage of the public land and the implications that might arise in case of unscrupulous trader. Therefore, the requirement of the franchising or licensing will help in ensuring that the persons are protected from unauthorized commercial activities which might take advantage of uniformed persons in the recreation places and public lands. The Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs should therefore go ahead and in Section 1, Chapter 12.5 of Commercial Activity on Public Land and the use of the city parks because of the interest of the people in regards to the health, security, and safety of the citizens of the city. It is important to take in consideration that the proper planning leads to efficient commercial activities on the public land, and when the city management board of commissioners are able to account for the activity of commercial activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Here none. Mr. Smith, can you please tell us what effect it's going to have to the nonprofit organizations?
Yes, the good thing about this proposal is there's flexibility built into it. These decisions can be made in the franchise agreement process that comes before you. Also, there is an allowance in there for special permits to be issued, and I believe those can even be issued by the city manager, and those would address those types of cases where a nonprofit's involved, etc. There's also a question about boat ramp usage. Now, I can say my understanding of the Dunedin example is they do require a franchise agreement for anything utilizing a boat ramp, even if it's indirect. It might be a kayak company, and their interpretation is that affects the use of that park and that boat ramp, and they want to be part of getting that approved or not. So I hope that answers your question on those.
But again, in the simple case like Pete for Tarpon meeting out there, prayer groups, things like that, all those things, those wouldn't apply under this in the commercial group. 20 people from a church want to go out there for a prayer group, as long as, again, as Mr. Bolton stated, the limits of how many people, how much is fed rest. But most of the ones that I know, I mean, there's a lot of groups that meet out there, but they're not commercial, they're not charged, they're not that. They're out there, a group of people sitting, whatever, talking about politics, meeting again in prayer, meeting in other things, and this is not intended or would have no effect on those type of groups that go out there and utilize the park as a great setting to do what they're going to do.
Thank you. Since we have you at the podium, would you explain the special events process?
Oh, boy. I don't really get involved in it directly. I'm going to ask the city manager to help me.
That's Tom function on that.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding about all that.
Most of these that we're talking about, I mean, we know who the people are, the people trying to give tennis lessons on our courts, people trying to go there and sell things and do things, the people trying to run their classes. Most of the time, you don't have to worry about catching them in session, because through the great social media age and stuff, we already see them advertising and charging for their things on city property and can catch them before it even happens, because we get the word from the Facebook and stuff, this one's going to hold a class charging $50 to use our facility to do. So most of those in this social media world, you get ahead of time and stuff, so.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question.
Sorry. Yes, I was, wanting to answer some of David's concerns. I know with nonprofits and events, there's an event application process that you go through Tom Function's office for certain events or special events. As far as businesses or small businesses, I encourage small businesses. Obviously, I'm a business owner. I think, though, with people charging for a yoga class or for kayaking, or this is at least a process, because you could have 5, 10, 15 commercial kayak businesses running from Craig Park, and we need that for our citizens. That's a very important boat ramp. Or yoga classes, rather than having their own building using the park. So I think this is good to have a process, because we need to, be aware of our own citizens using the parks for their, enjoyment, and not having it used by commercial business owners. But, I don't think that it's overused by small businesses, but I think it's good to have a process that we abide by. So thank you for your comments, David.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I've got one more. Just for clarification, the franchise or license agreement, do you know the cost behind that, or what that would be, or is it per occurrence? Are we aware of what that is?
I'm going to ask the city attorney if she's got any information on that.
We have some franchise agreements. They're all a little bit different because it's based on what they're planning on using it for and the licensing for the facilities. I can tell you there are some franchise agreements that mostly protect the city with regards to liability. Using the yoga class example, there would probably be a small fee for utilizing the park for a commercial activity like that, but there would also be a provision within the franchise agreement or within the licensing agreement that would say that you're going to indemnify and hold harmless the city in the event that one of your patrons, clients, gets injured on city property because of something that you have brought them to there for commercial activity.
Right.
So I think it's going to depend on the type of activity. There's likely will be some sort of a fee schedule or negotiation within the franchise agreement. For licensing fees, that'll be something that's going to be most likely a fee schedule. But I'll get with Tom and get you a more concrete answer on that.
Okay, so we'll have it on the second reading then?
Yeah, I'll ask him about that.
Because obviously, like, looking at retail and wholesale of food, beverage would be different than like a yoga class, right? Mm-hmm. Or something along the lines of renting jet skis or sailboats would be different than
right. And I think
Pilates class. Or
I mean,
like
I can say that I have assisted with drafting licensing agreements with recreational facilities, not for parks, but for the actual facility, for snack bar usage and things like that. So these are things that are already happening within the city of Tarpon, just not specific to commercial activity within the parks themselves.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Paul.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. The chair will entertain the motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Panther?
Yes.
Mayor Alahouzes?
Yes. Next is item number 15, the ordinance 2019-02. This is the application 18-148, LDC amendment, development agreement. This is a second reading. City Attorney, please read the ordinance.
Ordinance number 2019-02, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending paragraph D of section 96 of Article 6 of Appendix A Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code by increasing the duration of a development agreement by providing for severability and providing for an effective date. Published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on January 11th, 2019 and February 15th, 2019.
Good evening, Heather Earler, your Planning and Zoning Director. This was heard at the last hearing, and there's been no additional information since then. I can answer any questions that you might have.
Any commission comments, questions?
I just want to, thank you, Mayor, clarifying. So with the development agreement, once they're negotiated, and if you have a code change, let's say 3 years after it is agreed upon, then the original code at the agreement of the date is enforced.
Correct. Unless it's a 3-year agreement, then there's a question there. So if it's a 5-year agreement, so if you went with the max negotiation time, you'd have a additional 2-year window that the previous code would actually apply under that developer agreement, not the new regulations.
So today it's 5 years, right?
Today it's 5 years.
Do you know, and City Manager, maybe you can help out with this, has anybody in the past gone less than 5 years, or have we made a development agreement less than 5 years?
That I don't know, because all the developer agreements that I have seen that you've done in the last, say, maybe 8 years or so, those are the ones that I'm basically touching on a regular basis, have all been for 5 years. Okay. But there may have been ones in the past. I'd have to do a little bit of research. It's certainly something we can look into.
I think it's good to have that option, that at least the city manager and the board knows that we don't have to, if this is passed, that you don't have to be the entire 10 years. I think that's an important reminder when these come up before the board, that the development agreements don't have to be the full 10 years. So thank you.
Any other commission comments? No. Are there any public comments on this item?
Peter Lax, 514 Ashland Avenue, Tarpon Springs. Thank you, Commissioner Carr. You brought up a very relevant point there, that if you approve a development agreement, it's by the old codes. And let's just read here what it actually says. The duration of a development agreement shall not exceed currently 5 years. It may be extended by mutual consent of the Board of Commissioners and the developer, subject to a public hearing in accordance with the requirements of this article and a review for compliance with current city ordinances and regulations. Why are you wanting to give developers more time to do their projects? We've got projects sitting around Tarpon that when I was on the board were approved and they're still sitting vacant. The Banyans. Callista Cay is finally now filling up. The Mears Crossing, y'all know about that. That's still mostly vacant. So why are you giving up your power? And as I pointed out before, if you do a development agreement this year during a current election, then year 2, you're going to have election for 2 more commissioners. Year 3, an off year. Year 4, you're going to have a mayor, 2 commissioners. In year 5, 2 new commissioners. So potentially, you can have 4 elections within 5 years where you can have total rechange of a makeup of a board. And you're giving that board or future boards taking away their power. And in fact, you will be dealing with the next ordinance with conditional uses, and if you look N6 on that ordinance, it ties conditional uses to the development agreement. So by approving this up to 10 years, basically you're giving a conditional use for 10 years. And I don't think that's your intent. You're giving up too much power. It says public hearing. If 5 years they haven't been able to do it, let them come to Mark and say, hey, we need an extension. He brings it up to a public hearing, they bring their facts, the city discusses theirs, and you have the right at that point to extend it for a year, 2 years, however long. But you're giving up your power and the power of future boards to regulate the development. And y'all all talk about in these forums keeping the preservation historic and smart growth, blah, 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 blah. This is how you control it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item?
I was just,
Commissioner Stieber, go
just
ahead.
had a question. Heather, could you speak a little bit about us not necessarily giving everyone 10 years, but there's some flexibility there as to each project and what the amount of time is?
Sure. It says in the new language, it's up to 10 years. So that would give you the ability to vary anywhere from a year to that 10-year time frame. And I would recommend that when we're doing it through the negotiation process, that there's a phasing schedule provided to you that kind of shows how that timeline is going to lay out for the approvals that they need, for any funding that, you know, they require to receive. Sometimes you have affordable housing that uses a developer agreement where there's a funding gap and they have to kind of wait. You know, that those type of things get included in the actual negotiation process in the terms of the developer agreement.
So we could be given a date that's, you know, is possible where this project could be completed and base our, you know, what we vote on each individual project and what you recommend as far as
Certainly, and that could be negotiated that night. I mean, the agreements that come before you are amendable up to you signing them. So essentially, at any point during the time, you can amend the negotiated terms. This board has complete control of what Mark and I and other staff negotiate on your behalf for the terms of those developer agreement. You don't like them, you say no. I mean that theoretically that's how it is. So it's no different than any other application.
That's the way I understood it. Yes, thank you.
Do you expect to see many projects to be longer than 5 years?
I don't know that because most of the projects that you've had a significant lag of time as a result of the economic downturn. So they were impacted by the economics of the world around them. I can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow, never mind 2 years, 10 years from now. So I have no idea what the impact's going to be. If you're going to have a lot of projects, is there ability to annex property into the city? Absolutely. You have a bunch of property that's within the city's jurisdictional boundary that hasn't been annexed in. So there's potential on those properties that are currently under the county's jurisdiction. Some of that's large properties. There's the Stauffer site. What's going to happen with the Stauffer site? Somebody could come in and petition the city for that to be annexed in. That's a huge piece of property. Yeah, it's got some environmental constraints on it, but it's a big piece of property. And how that develops in the future, a developer agreement would be a serious tool for us to consider if we're doing that type of project. And so there are pieces of property that are adjacent to your boundaries or within your boundary that significantly could be utilized this particular process. So the answer to that is I don't know if that will happen in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but it's certainly a possibility. The economy is better than it was 5 years ago.
Any other commissioner comment, questions? Roll call, please. Excuse me, I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And now roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
No.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor Alahouzes?
Yes, thank you. Item number 16 is the ordinance 2019-03. This is the application 18-149, LDC amendment conditional use. This is the first reading. The attorney, please read the ordinance.
Ordinance number 2019-03, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending Section 209 of Article 12 of Appendix A, the Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code, by providing the correct title of the Planning and Zoning Department adding the words "or designee" to approval by the city manager, providing for the ability to approve a site plan separate from the corresponding conditional use approval, amending the expiration provision of an approved conditional use, adding a waiver of the 1-year expiration, and providing an alternate expiration schedule when a conditional use is approved in conjunction with a development agreement, providing for severability and providing for an effective date. The second reading will be held on March 19th, 2019, and was published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on February 8th, 2019.
Thank you again, Heather Earler, Planning and Zoning Director and staff to this application. This is an amendment to the conditional use section of the Land Development Code. Essentially, we're looking to make 2 major changes and a couple of minor changes. The major changes are changing the trigger for the conditional use lapsing. So instead of a conditional use expiring or lapsing after before a building permit is secured within a year, we're asking for that trigger to actually be the site plan. So we're asking for 2 things. We're asking for that site plan to be changed to the trigger rather than the building permit. We're also including in that language that the site plan would have to come within 12 months of the conditional use being approved. So we're preserving the 12-month time frame between the conditional use and a site plan rather than conditional use and the building permit. And there's 2 instances that we've had in the very recent past that you guys have seen. The 2 houses that were over on Orange Street that are currently under construction, because of the process that they had to go through, because they're in the historic district, they needed to get site plan approval through the building permit process, because again, they're single-family residential, so they're exempted from coming to see you specifically for site plan approval. And then they also need to get their conditional use approval. And what happened was, while they were going through the steps to get the HPB approval, the conditional use lapsed. So as a result, they did not have all their approvals before they could get their building permit before the lapsing of the conditional use. So they had to come back through the process. That significantly slowed down their development time. That's a very small example. We had a similar issue happen on the Nitneel project. You saw them come back. Theirs was a little bit different. That's the storage place out on 19. They went through twice in the conditional use. In their particular case, again, it was a site planning issue. They were able to get their site plan, but their building plans were not obtained in the timely manner. So as a result, they had to come back to the process and re-secure the approvals that they needed for the increases and changes that they were making under the building permit plans with this board because of the resolutions and the things that we prepare. So those are 2 recent examples in the last year or so that we've had where we've had some issues with people being able to go from the building permit or from the conditional use process, getting approved here, and then making it successfully through and getting the approval for their building permits. Because the trigger is actually receiving the building permit or receiving a business tax license. It's not just submitting for it. Your site plan has a different test. Your site plan basically is within 1 year you'll submit a building permit. So the building permit doesn't actually have to be secured within that 1 year, it has to be submitted. So there's a little different test for a site plan. And then also in that language under site plan, this board has the ability to vary that 1 year time frame with an alternate schedule. So what we're trying to do here is accomplish 2 things. One, we're trying to provide for those instances where we're already seeing projects that are having struggles to make it through the process to the building permit actual approval. And we're trying to also accomplish at the same time aligning up of your applications when you have a complicated development proposal that comes in. The other big change that we're asking for is, yes, as Peter had spoken under the previous application, we're asking for a change that essentially aligns the conditional use with the development agreement process so that you can look at both of those applications and that you can have your conditional use should you choose. Again, should you choose. This board is under complete control of when things get approved when we have alternate development schedules. Whatever the staff brings you is a proposal, usually from a negotiation between the staff and the applicant based on the parameters of their particular project. That doesn't bind you to that agreement. It doesn't matter whether it's a developer agreement or a conditional use or a site plan asking for an alternate phasing schedule. You as a board have the complete authority to determine what those timeframes need to be. And so we're trying to provide for the aligning of conditional use when a developer agreement is requested at the same time, that those timeframes, the conditional use doesn't basically expire in a year and they've got to keep coming back. Keep coming back, keep coming back. Developer agreements do not generally go from 0 to 60 that quickly. They don't go from getting their conditional use and their development agreement negotiated and then right into building permit. It usually, there's some lag time in between. So as a result, that's why people request developer agreements, because they need some additional time to work through the process. Or they have problems or conditions on their property that require mitigation or some other issue that they've got to work through as part of their process. So many times that's why developer agreements are used. They're a great tool, but when you have a particular use where a conditional use is required, it becomes very difficult to align those two applications when you have a 12-month strict deadline. So we're looking for you to provide a little bit of flexibility there so that you can align these applications and actually make really good decisions on what the proper timeframes are, and that we're not coming back to you with these conditional uses and those types of things when we have a project that's a little bit more complex. So those are the two major issues. The other one is I'm changing the name of the department. It's right now the planning division. I'm no longer a division. I haven't been one for about 3 or 4 years, so we're going to change that. And then we're also asking for some language to include in the section for conditional uses that lapse that are less than 6 months. Mark is currently in the position to be able to approve those. We're just asking that it be Mark or his designee, so the city manager or his designee, should that need arise, that, that is the thing. You're going to see that consistently as we change through the code. We're going to add designee to almost every one of those things, because what's happening is some of the positions that we used to have, we now use a consultant for. So we want to have the authority as a designee so that that can be an assigned role rather than being a static role in the code, because things change over time here and the codes aren't always kept up to date. So those are the four changes in there, 2 major, 2 minor. I can answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Heather. Just for clarification, you are proposing to the trigger for the conditional use to be the site plan instead of the building permit.
Correct.
Is it a possibility that the customer, the applicant, can get the site plan and then he can delay the permit because he doesn't feel like or doesn't have the funds to go forward with it?
That's absolutely what's happened in the past. So it is a potential that could happen.
Okay. So what is the gain for the city then?
Well, the gain for the city is you're tying that to the site plan approval. If the site plan expires, so the site plan that you approve, if it expires, then you use the expiration process under both sections of code. They would have to come back and get the conditional use if it's expired, and they would have to come back and get their site plan. It's theoretically, it would be better for someone to use a combined process where they get their site plan and conditional use, and we try to push people in that direction so that they get both applications at the same time. But you do have applicants that want to separate those applications. They want to know that they have approval for the use before they spend a lot of money designing their projects. So we do have applicants that are not in a position to provide for that extra outlay of money to design full site plans to come in here and not know if they can do their use. So they want that preliminary step to be able to do that. We're trying to provide some additional time for that to happen so that we can align the processes in an easier mechanism, at least for some of the people coming in, because we've had 3 cases now.
Okay. Explain to us a little bit better, if you would, please, on the development agreement. You say that you like to see the conditional use to be connected to the development agreement, to be part of it.
In the case where you have a conditional use that's actually approved in conjunction with a developer agreement, that's correct. We would like to see them align to give this board the opportunity to alter or provide an alternate phasing schedule, I guess, essentially, for that conditional use that they can do as in conjunction with the developer agreement. So the assumption is that the developer agreement is either already negotiated or negotiated along with the conditional use.
So the conditional use instead of a year can be a year and a half or 2 years based on the agreement.
It would be based on whatever you approve as a board, correct?
Thank you. Commissioner Gicka?
Yes, thank you, Heather.
I'm sorry, but Seaver.
He called you Gicka.
I said, no.
Oh. I know you were looking at me. Thanks, Heather. I know that delaying a process for approval or having to come back can be very frustrating for the developer or the applicants, and so I think this is a good way to go. It can also be very costly, so having to go through a process more than one time is not good when we want businesses to come into town. So thank you. I think this is a great idea. I approve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got two questions. One, it's number one, if conditional use ceases for less than 6 months, its approval shall not be considered to have lapsed or expired. I don't understand that. So does that mean that the applicant says they no longer want to use it or put it on hold or something? Am I missing? Am I reading too much into this?
Where are you
here?
at? You're at
Number one.
Number one.
And section 1.
Number 1, section 1, the site plan approval, if it's required in accordance with the provisions of this code, the site plan is that one?
And letter N, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's where you added the designee.
Yeah, what I also did was lapse is not the terminology. I think it's more appropriate to call it an expiration because everything else in your code expires as an expiration date. It doesn't lapse. So we're changing that. That's why you'll see that language in there where we're changing the word lapse to expire. And so basically it says if a conditional use ceases for less than 6 months, its approval shall not be considered to have expired, and reissuance of a business tax license to maintain such use may be approved by the city manager or their designee. Basically what that says is if you have a use that has ceased for less than the 6 months, you don't have to come back through the formal public hearing process. You can reapply for your local business tax license, and that can be approved by the city manager.
Okay.
Or his designee.
I'm in support of this in some aspects. Looking at the development agreement with the duration of the maximum, on a number 6, it says the alternate schedule may not exceed the maximum duration of the approved development agreement in accordance with the code.
Mm-hmm.
So based on what was just passed, I think a few minutes ago, that the conditional use could stand for 10 years. Am I correct in saying that?
Theoretically, yes, if you aligned both of them with a maximum time frame.
Yeah. Like, here's an example that I could think of for an item. Like, for instance, Pinellas Avenue, you wouldn't be able to have a car dealership on Pinellas Avenue unless it's under conditional use. And let's say someone comes to us today and they want a conditional use and wants to put a car dealership, which I don't think is fitting necessarily on Pinellas Avenue. But then they don't do it, and they have a development agreement in place, and then they have this for up to 10 years potentially. So in the meantime, we have redevelopment along Pinellas Avenue, let's say, with mixed uses of some sort, more apartments, more residential, and then that same plot could come back in year 9 or 10 and use a conditional use that they received approval on. It could be a different owner potentially. And then build a car lot. So I do have some concerns about that following the development agreement. So I would suggest, and I'm not sure if that was clear in how I use that as an example, but I would make a suggestion that we look at half of the time in the development agreement to come forward with a minimum of 1.5 years or something along those lines. Is that something that would be fair still? Because I still want to be respectful to developers, and I think a year isn't enough at times because you've showed some great examples, I think. But I think up to 8-10 years is too much in that aspect because it really gives too much wiggle room for conditional use, because a lot of things can change in 10 years in Tarpon Springs and the way the community is. If we've got a booming area and let's say one board thinks it's a good idea now, but realistically 10 years from now it could be a terrible idea. We don't know, and most likely we won't be on the board at the time also. It could be a similar situation where, I guess a good example would be the mirror situation where we all got berated about the apartments and about the fish and all these other things where most of us weren't even on the board at the time when it was approved. So you're looking at over X amount of years. So that would be something I would make a suggestion on. We look at potentially putting half of the agreed upon development agreement for the conditional use in that aspect. I don't know if the rest of the board feels comfortable with that or not. It still extends the conditional use for much longer than a year, but then it also forces the developer to move forward with the project as well. No further questions.
Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Heather, do you see what Commissioner Carr's talking about done in other communities where they're adopting, say like we passed, 15, right, and now we're at 16, and we're gonna reduce that down to half of the conditional use. I mean, have you seen that done or?
Generally, I've actually seen the languages written very differently where conditional uses, where the use is actually approved as part of during a waiver process. A conditional use is actually not required when you're dealing with a developer agreement. If there's a waiver process under the developer agreement section where if there's a use that's discussed, there's a compatibility test. The test that's used for conditional use is moved into the developer agreement section, and I've actually seen them negotiated in 2 other counties here that way, where you're dealing with a waiver. You're not actually bringing a formal conditional use process. It's a waiver process that's part of your developer agreement negotiation. And again, that would be sequenced because in that case, that waiver is only good as long as your developer agreement is good. But again, that requires a massive, changing of the way you guys do business here. That's a big change from where the way we currently operate and with the way these have been done in the past here.
Any other question, comment? We're going to the public comments. Any public comments on this item? The chair will entertain a motion.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
No.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. We are now going to the ordinance 2019-04. This is the application 18-175. LDC amendment to fee schedules. This is the first reading. City Attorney, please read the ordinance.
Ordinance number 2019-04, an ordinance of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending the Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code of the City of Tarpon Springs as follows. Amending Section 55 of Article 4 to provide for the hiring of an independent qualified professional to review wetlands and habitat impacts, renumbering section as appropriate, and amending Section 246 of Article 15 to provide a category to fee schedule to cover cost of hiring a qualified professional to review wetland and habitat impacts, providing for repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance. The second reading will be held on March 19th, 2019, and will be published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on March 8th, 2019.
Again, Heather Hurley, your Planning and Zoning Director and staff for this particular application. This is the language formally coming through the process that we talked about at your last hearing when we talked about the adoption of the future land use elements, that it implements, or the future land use element, and sorry, the coastal element, that implements the language in the future land use element that we added about the qualified professional and the board confirming that qualified professional. This basically codifies it into your land development code into 2 sections. One is the wetland section where we're basically saying when you do the wetland and upland review, that qualified professional is a requirement of that if you're using if the flux map is an issue. And then we're also adding it to the fee schedule where we're actually looking to, the city's looking to recoup the cost of that third party reviewing those applications. So that's the crux of the particular language that's here. I can answer any questions you have, but this is the exact same language that I brought you last meeting. It's just been to the Planning and Zoning Board. And they, of course, did not approve it. So this particular language has not been, or was vetted through them, but we had a 3-3 vote. There was only 6. So as a result, there was no tiebreaker. So it did not pass. It's denied based on the fact that there was a tie vote.
Any commission comment? Commissioner.
I just got a question. I agree that the developer should pay a fee. Have you seen this, like, for instance, the developer would pay 75%? Do you feel that it's part of the city's responsibility as opposed to have some vetting of this in there? And I know your city staff time has that already, but and my kind of thinking in this would be like the city would cover 25%, developer would cover 75%. I don't know what the costs would be for something like this, and I guess it would depend on the size of the project, I would imagine, the size of the property, and then the amount of, complications potentially that could come up in a property. Am I assuming that correctly?
Agreed, because obviously we haven't gone out to bid for anything like this, so I have nothing with the exception of the surveyor, the way we use the survey for your subdivisions as an example. That's the only example I've got, and that's a very different process because they have such a narrow statutory requirement that they have to actually look at to do conformance. So it's a whole different animal when you're talking about environmental conditions. There's just so much that could happen on a property. The qualified professional could have to go out, negotiate with the other environmental professional. I have no idea what that's going to take. So we would have to write a request for qualifications just to get an idea of what those services even cost. We don't have a good estimate right now.
Okay. Part of me that's somewhat concerning. That's why I think we need to have some type of percentage in place that the city would cover part of it and the developer would cover the other part of it. I'm not sure what the rest of the board feels, if this is appropriate or not. But I don't have any further questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Heather, I have one question to ask you. We hire the professional, the qualified professional to identify the wetlands. That's because the map that we have from the state is not up to date, correct?
We have a map adopted in our comprehensive plan and now a process adopted in the comprehensive plan that would require that. So the map is a trigger that just shows the areas in the city where those upland habitats of significant concern are located.
The map, it doesn't give you that information at all.
The map gives you the location, but it's not going to tell you how big the property is or whether the actual habitat exists. Habitat change over time, and that map hasn't been updated since the mid-90s.
Okay. So that's going to be a good verification.
Correct. That's the process by which we brought through for you.
Thank you. Any Vice Mayor Pence?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Heather. And I do, like the spirit of this item, in the sense that we are having somebody review these plans. My issue is kind of taking it a bit further than like Commissioner Carr, is that having the applicant pay for all of it. To me, though that this is overly simplified, it's like, we would charge residents for the meter reader to come out to check your water meter. I just think that applicants pay enough fees that the city should pay the qualified professional to perform the service. What have you seen in surrounding communities?
Well, most of the other communities that we've researched, because we looked at this not too long ago on a bigger scale for all the consultants that we could utilize potentially, what we've seen is most of the communities around us recoup those costs now.
Do you see any kind of splits like Commissioner Carr said?
There are splits. There are places that do have splits. I don't have that list with me right now. I certainly have that information. We did find places where there was, partial recovery rather than full recovery. That's at your discretion whether you want full recovery or partial recovery. At this point, we brought you what we think is probably the fairest thing, is to have developers who have to go through this process pay for that additional qualified professional, because it's an extra service the city has to acquire for their development. So they are triggering the need for that qualified professional.
Yes, obviously yes, but though it's being triggered by our rules.
Sure.
And they're also paying numerous other fees. It's not the only fee they're paying to work in the city.
Agreed.
So, I would certainly compromise with a split. but I'm definitely opposed for the applicant to pay all the fee.
Okay.
Any other commission comments? Commission Stevens?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think we definitely need a professional to assess the wetlands and habitat impacts, because we've had some situations where we've had problems with that. I do agree with maybe a split and not the developer paying the whole cost. That's it. Thank you.
Any other commission comments? No. I'd like to go to the public comments on this item.
Good evening. My name is John Terrapini, 22 North Spring Boulevard. I certainly appreciate wetlands and parks and environmental lands. I helped negotiate the 120-acre purchase of the McMullen property to expand the park there at Wall Springs. I negotiated most of the island purchases in the Anclo River. I served on the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation, but from looking at this, on items 15 and 16, you took 2 steps forward, and this you're going to take 1 step back when it comes to incentivizing investments in the community. So let me just tell you how that's going to work. When an investor comes in and he gets a piece of vacant land, his costs are onerous at best, I can tell you that. He has to, if he's zoned properly, land used properly, has everything in place, he has to hire an environmental consultant to go out and stake the wetlands, okay? Then the investor has to have SwiftMud, who's in charge of wetland delineation lines, come out and verify that the environmentalists stake that line correctly. Sometimes they make them move the line and say, you're encroaching on the wetlands, we want you to move it out. After, and the investor is paying SwiftMud and all the fees and applications to do that. After the line is agreed upon between the investor's environmentalist and the SwiftMud regulatory environmentalist, then a certified survey, which is tens of thousands of dollars at best case, comes and certifies the line with GPS coordinates, and that's how the wetland delineation, a certified wetland delineation is established. So what you're proposing now is the developer investor has already paid for this service in full one time, and now you're wanting him to pay again to come and have the city, who has no regulatory authority on it, review it. It's just a redundant, it's another level of bureaucracy that you don't need. You've got SwiftMud, you've got Army Corps of Engineers, you've got DEP as your watchdogs, and the city certainly has the right, when they look at the wetland delineation, to make comments to SwiftMud or question SwiftMud. So you have the vehicle in place, and I just think, you've got, in 2 weeks, you've got a referendum trying to incentivize business to come to town. And I think the first 2 things tonight were good changes, because people were having to come back and spend more money and things like that. But I think this is not going to help you. It's going to hurt you in the long run, and it's just an unnecessary expense and an unnecessary bureaucratic hurdle for investors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Answer any questions if you...
No. Public comments.
Peter Lax, 514 Ashland Avenue. First off, as to Mr. Terrapini's comments about the needs here, it says the city may elect to hire. Doesn't say shall, it says may. So they do have the option, if they have doubts, to ask for someone to verify the information they're being provided. Secondly, our wetlands serve a vital purpose. They purify water, they allow for flooding mitigation, and there's another interesting aspect in here that is under H, compensatory wetland mitigation. Because we're always talking about our wetlands and preserving them, but here you're talking about mitigating. Shall be of the same type, replacement ratio 1.5 to 1, which is at least decent. And the mitigation plan shall include the granting of a conservation easement. Reason why I bring this up as far as mitigation, because the Walmart property has 24 acres of wetlands. And again, when I talk about the economic potential of this property, something I didn't get a chance to mention before, is the city can create a mitigation bank and use that property for mitigation within the city. And it's pretty much like most of the other wetlands you're going to find in the city. We did this originally with the Mears Crossing, and if Paul was here, he could confirm the work that was done on the golf course, and I know Mr. LaCours can. And also out on the Anclote River, North Anclote River Park. But there's only so much land out there that can be done for mitigation. So that's why I sometimes say you have to kind of look at the bigger picture here. That Walmart property is a valuable asset to the city of Tarpon Springs for more than one reason. And the commissioners and Mr. Terrapini do bring up a fact about costs, and if you wish to debate a splitting, that would be your decision, but it does again say you may require. It doesn't say shall. So if you agree with all the surveys that are given during the process and with FDEP and SwiftMud, and they all look good to you, you don't need another one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Yes, Commissioner King.
Heather, I have a question. So when would it be determined that we would want to order, that the city would order a survey?
Well, the comp plan language is very specific. If the wetlands and upland areas are delineated on the map, regardless of the size, at that time, we would have to hire a qualified professional to do that evaluation.
Even though there's one done by the developer?
You put in the language there shall, so last meeting we changed that language from may to shall, so yes, we would have to do that. We took out the 5 acres or larger and put in the shall.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't one of the reasons that we're looking at doing this is because things change, like for the Mears Crossing project, weren't some of these studies done and not repeated recently when that project started?
Well, those studies were still permitted by the state, so the studies were still valid under the state permits.
Yeah, I understand that, but things changed in 10 years. So couldn't, the wetlands or the lines or whatever have changed as well?
Theoretically, yes, but once the state certifies it, that's the boundary by which we go by unless they request a change.
But wouldn't a consultant then maybe go back and say, well, this changed or that changed and we need to change, what we're doing?
I would say theoretically, yes, under the language that we're looking at now.
Okay.
Can we have a discussion amongst the board in this situation? Okay. Vice Mayor Banther, you mentioned something along the lines of a compromise from having some type of fee. Is 50% in line? And can we have this discussion, City Attorney? Is this okay to have? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the public comment's already been had.
Okay.
I mean, unless there's any other questions for staff.
Are you comfortable with 50%? Is that something that could be agreeable, or is this?
I mean,
it's a compromise, I think, between the two.
I'm at 0%. I mean, you know, I could be comfortable with a split, but I'm at 0% pretty much. I'm fine with the city reviewing environmental things. I have no issue with that. I think we discussed that when we did the land, when we did all the road changes. As far as the applicant paying for this item, I just have a beef with that.
Okay.
I'm sorry. If it's our requirement, then we maybe should be responsible for picking up the fee.
Okay. I'm leaning more towards a 50% aspect myself, between the two. I know it's a requirement that the city has to do, but it's also due diligence in the city, but then it's also the project that the developer is working on. I think it's a good compromise between the two. I see both sides of it. That both make sense to me, but I think this is a 50% split between the developer and 50% split between the city, I think is a good landing spot. And I would be happy to make that motion to.
I agree with the compromise of Commissioner Carr, the 50%. I'll go along with that, Commissioner Super.
As it's been pointed out, the developer has a lot of expenses, and since we're requiring this, adding another expense, we do want to attract developers to Tarpon Springs. So I feel that the city should bear the cost.
We need a motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that when it comes to the fees for this application 19-11, oh no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. 219-04, LDC amendment to fee schedules, that the city, since this is our requirement, that we are responsible for the cost, 100%.
And you agree with all the other changes, the whole thing, okay? And roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
No.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes.
Question for the attorney. We would have to re-advertise because that significantly changes the header of the ordinance.
Yes, the title of the ordinance.
So we'd be bringing this back again for another first read. I just want to make you aware of that so you don't get a surprise when we bring it back for a second read. Okay?
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, we're now going to item number 18, which is the application 19-11, appeal of Heritage Preservation Board decision on certificate of approval at 58 Ridge Street. Staff report, please.
Again, Heather, Planning and Zoning Director, staff to this application too. Okay. This is a appeal request to a decision that was rendered by the Heritage Preservation Board on January 14th of this year for 58 Reed Street. At 58 Reed Street, there is a principal structure and also a contributing secondary structure, which is a garage that's kind of turned into a shed. It's missing some doors and windows, and it's leaning slightly. So this applicant actually is in code enforcement right now. They were seeking to come through the process to actually meet the requirements of code enforcement, which was to demo the structure. When they went to the Heritage Preservation Board meeting, they went a couple of times. They got continued a couple of times as well. Basically, the premise was that the Heritage Preservation Board recommended that the demolition not be allowed and that they have to rebuild the structure. There is in your packet a letter in the back that actually went to the HPB board from the contractor that there's a couple of sisters who own this in conjunction, this family property. And essentially what it says is the building needs to be removed. It's in such poor condition that structurally it's unsafe. And if they had to, they basically would be rebuilding it from scratch to comply with the HPB order. So that being said, that's what the relief is being sought here is they're looking to being able to demo that structure remove it from the property so they can get out of code enforcement and come into compliance. And I can answer any questions that you have. We tried to provide as much backup as we possibly could here from the hearing and with the minutes from what occurred at the hearing.
So the input that we got from the profession, it cannot be rebuilt?
From their contractor.
Yeah. And the contractor that we got the letter from, is the licensed contractor, we know that?
Correct. The applicants are also present here in the audience if you wish to hear from them.
Commission comments, question? Commission Siebert.
Yes. So if this building is beyond repair, it makes sense to me to abide by code enforcement and tear it down if it's unsafe. I don't think that the question of repair is possible. So I would vote that they would be allowed to demolish it.
Yeah, thank you. Can we talk about the demolition and what the historic preservation is about in the historic area of Tarpon Springs? Because I know you provided the decision to demolish a historic structure as a measure of last resort and shall be based on the demolition, that there is no feasible alternative. In this aspect, it's not a relatively large building, so I think there's an alternative to fix it and establish and keep a historic structure in Tarpon Springs. We only have so many of these in Tarpon Springs. It's a detached garage / shed that is a contributing structure. So I think it would be a disservice to the historic district to see something like this torn down, and it would be better to see it, I suppose, renovated and updated. So I don't support the demolition of this right now based on what the Heritage Preservation Board has stated, and also looking at the demolition and relocation guidelines from the historic district guidelines.
Vice Mayor Panther.
Thank you. And having served on that board, in fact, you know, the with Commissioner Carr, I have great respect for the historic preservation methods in the board itself. And if this is overturned tonight, I would want to stress to the board that does not mean that we think you did wrong or that we disagree with you completely. I would always encourage the preservation board to err on the side of caution when it comes to what they're doing, and for situations like this that I think are unique, you know, I think the appeals process is appropriate. It's very hard for me to look at this structure, the condition it's in, and then where it's located. That it can hardly be seen that that we should put the burden upon the homeowner to repair that. I just don't believe that's necessary. I do see what the Historic Preservation Board was doing. I don't think their denial was crazy, but in this situation, I don't have any opposition to overturning it. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I just want to ask, so this is contributing?
Correct. The secondary structure itself is contributing the garage / shed.
Okay. And, you know, and none of us like to see us lose a piece of history and a contributing factor in the city. I mean, unfortunately, we've had to tear some big pieces of property down because of neglect to the property. But I mean, you know, I mean, we have a report in backup that, you know, states that it's just under really disrepair. It needs to be torn down. But if we approve it being torn down, do they then have to build under the codes of the historic preservation? Or can we put that in our motion, or, you know what I'm saying? Do they have to rebuild? Can they rebuild a new structure, build a new structure according to the guidelines of
Well, they're not asking for a new structure. All they're asking for is to remove the existing structure. So should they come back through, if this is approved tonight and overturned, they could take the structure down, get out of code compliance. If they wanted to build a garage again, they would come back through the process with a new set of plans and go through Heritage Preservation
Have to
Board
go to
again
HPD.
and basically say, this is what we want to do.
Okay.
Heather, I have a great respect for the Heritage Preservation Board. They're doing an excellent job. And it's very important that we get our heritage and to preserve our heritage. Question that I have is, did the board had all the information that he needed?
The board was given the this actually went several times, so they actually had the applicant come back and requested additional information. So I would say yes, they were given all the information that they requested of the applicant.
And they had all these pictures that you have here?
That's correct. That packet is what went to HPB. The only new information is essentially the appeal letter and my cover memo.
I've got another comment, Mayor. I mean, the analysis that we have here is from the builder. Get back to it. It states the visual inspection of the rear building at 58 Reed Street, Tarpon Springs. It is my opinion that the building needs to be removed. The building is in poor condition, structurally unsafe, etc. But it doesn't really go into the details of what's structurally unsafe. Is the roof unsafe? Is it the foundation of the building? Is it extensive termite damage? There's no like comparison to what the cost of the building would be to replace it. There's no comparison to what it would cost to fix it in an analysis. Those are things that you would expect to see in a demolition of a historic building that I would expect to see, and I believe the Historic Preservation Board would expect to see it also, to make an educated decision to tear down the historic structure. Although it's not very big, it's still a contributing structure that could be standing for many, many years after this if it was properly taken care of. And we know wood structures do have tendencies to have wood rot and some other aspects and termites, and that's the property owner's responsibility. Yes, they have property rights, but at the same time, they own the property within the historic district, and we also have standards within the city to keep up your property in that aspect. So I'm just concerned that they're asking for it based on the construction company's letter here, and it doesn't have the other aspects built in. We would need to see something along the lines of what it would cost to fix it, what it would cost to replace it, something along those lines to make a more educated decision, I believe. So, thanks.
Vice Mayor Panther, you had-
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask Heather, I assume their primary structure is all in compliance, the house?
That's correct. At this point, the house itself is in compliance. I believe all that is left on the code enforcement violation is literally just this structure.
So, and I don't know the owners, but I think that should also be taken into consideration that they are actively participating in preservation, having preserved their primary home. And you know, I mean, I'm not an expert, but just looking at this, I mean, you can repair anything. You know what I mean? If you have the money and the time and if you want to. But as far as what we're concerned of, what kind of burden do you want to put on the property owner? So I just want to point out again, first off, that I do respect the Heritage Board having served on there, and I do see their understanding in this. I do disagree with it. And you know, to be noted, this is not like the primary residence that's in disarray and we're saying knock it down, as has been done in much more prominent areas of Tarpon Springs. Okay, this is a back structure that I think we can have a compromise on and have this removed.
Any other comments, questions? We are now going to the public comment. Understand the owners here.
David Bolton, 508 North Gross Avenue, Tarpon Springs, Florida. I believe that this is absolutely the appropriate place for this decision to be made. While I can easily get to the agreement that structure should come down. I've seen it. The property is currently for sale. The primary structure is almost not inhabitable. So I don't think you can really say because they are in compliance with the primary structure that they should take down the shed. I don't think that's the logic we want to go down and then use that as a way of thinking for the future. I think the shed should stand alone. And I really appreciate the affirmation of the HPB and the work that they do. They absolutely made the correct decision. I struggle with the staff saying that they provided everything to the HPB that they were asked to, because in the staff report it specifically states that the board asked for information, and the staff actually states that the applicants did not respond to them, to the staff, nor did they provide those reports to the historic, and that is in your backup. My printer didn't work, so I couldn't get it. So while I agree that the structure, had the applicants followed up and given the board the correct information, the board probably would have agreed that that structure should come down. I've seen the structure. It's hard to count maybe 5 boards that are not eaten up with termites. I mean, it's bad. And it's leaning and unsafe. But I just wanted to affirm the HPB that I believe they made the right decision. They didn't do anything wrong. This board can make a decision to take down a structure without all of the guidelines being met. The board cannot. So I really appreciate the diligence that that board made in forcing this to come here. And saying that, I agree with the applicants that that structure, and the structure's for sale, the property's for sale. I don't think they have the money to repair the whole thing and to bring the house, and they're trying to do the best they can with what somebody has worked hard to make a living and build a future and leave them as an asset. And they just want to be able to become aware of those benefits of what their parents and relatives worked hard to leave them. Unfortunately, it's not in perfect shape, and they're trying to do the best they can to liquidate that property. So I think the structure should come down, and if you could go out there and look at it, you should. But I also want to affirm, like Commissioner Banther, the board, the Historic Preservation Board, did exactly what they should do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Bob Ray. I'm with Hoffman Architects. I've been with them for 35 years about, in Tarpon Springs for that time. I went to UF, have a master's in historic preservation. I worked on the Unitarian parsonage across the street. The reason that it is restored to look the way it does is because some of our talents were used to bring that about. I worked on the Safford House. I've worked on this building. I have a lot of experience with preservation. And one of the things that strikes me is a lot of times people who have a code enforcement issue or a historic preservation board issue, they don't know where to go. They don't know who to contact to help them describe to the preservation board what the conditions of the building are and how to interpret it. And I happened to be at a meeting, and I met these nice ladies, and I went over to the garage, and I've been inside of it. I've photographed it, walked around it. I started to write a report, and I realized that the condition of it was really not good. And it would be quite a task to try to bring it back. The foundations are gone. It's below grade on one side. There's a lot of rot. There's termites. The roof is bad. I mean, less than, like 40% of the building would have to be shored up and reconstructed. So for this particular project, I think the staff report is correct, and it should come down. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Go ahead. You be next. You don't want to speak? Okay. Any other public comments on this item? I'd still like to ask one question, if you don't mind. Why this building was neglected and it was let go to get to this point?
I can't answer that. As he had said previously.
The owner, right?
I'm sorry?
You're the owner of the building?
My sister and I, yeah. But previously, my father,
State your name and your address for the record.
Stivet Larscheid, 4042 Marchmont Boulevard, Land O'Lakes.
Okay, thank
So anyways, previously, my father had owned it, and he got sick, and he didn't keep it up. And so we inherited the house, and it's been not lived in for a while. And I mean, that's all I can say about why it's gotten to that point. He didn't keep it up, so I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
Just got ownership on that just recently?
No, it's been a while,
How long ago?
about 8 years.
8 years. What did you do to it 8 years?
Nothing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public comments on this item?
Thanks, Mayor. Just to be clear, I've been on the Historic Preservation Board as well, and I was part of the board when we evaluated demolishing a larger structure. And it's not the fact that I have an understanding and a realization that not all buildings are made to last forever. And I get that this building may be in a terrible case, but we weren't provided this information in the backup, and it's just from what public comment is. So for that, I struggle with that because our backup doesn't have the information needed to make an educated decision. It's based on what public comment has said. So if the information was provided in the backup saying this is what the engineer, or would say a builder, went a little more detailed instead of just sending a letter, it would make our decision a lot easier, right? Or at least for me. It sounds like the rest of the board has made a decision. So I just want to be clear, it's the amount of information that's in our backup that's been provided to the Historic Preservation Board and then provided to the Board of Commission that I struggle with to be able to say, I feel comfortable with allowing the property owners to tear it down. It sounds like it's in terrible shape, but at the end of the day, I don't have the backup data to show that. So with that, I can't move forward with it, but it sounds like the rest of the board is moving that direction. So thanks.
I also struggle with the fact, I also struggle with the fact as well, why all this time they didn't really take care of the building and let it go the way it is now.
They don't live here.
Well, they have it for 8 years.
I know you've closed public comment, but they just passed me a letter that they would like to put in record.
This letter comes from the architect?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
You know, I feel we have enough evidence here in front of us in the backup. There's a letter from the certified building contractor that says that this structure is structurally unsafe and is not built in accordance with the current building standards, and it would really should be demolished. It's just an unsafe building. Can I make a motion?
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow applicant 19-11 to remove the building.
Second.
Can I make a quick recommendation? I think it would be a good idea to make a recommendation to include this into the record from Mr. Page. Obviously, he's got Mr. Ray. He's got an extensive background, and I feel that this is something that would be respected in this demolition, and I would be okay to move forward with that.
That's fine.
I would like to read it too. See what it says. Well, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions, discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor Alhouzes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to item number 19, which is the discussion evaluation process for city manager, city clerk, and city attorney. Commissioner Carr, place that on the agenda. Start with you, Commissioner Carr.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to bring up, obviously I've been on the board for about coming on 2 years, so I'm always learning new things about my requirements as a city commissioner and representing the citizens of Tarpon Springs. So I wanted to bring up a couple items to look at from an evaluation standpoint. How do we coach the individual positions that report directly to the board? So that would be the city attorney, the city clerk, and the city manager. And then how do we express how we feel they're doing in their positions and reporting to the board as well, and a meaningful impact where the residents could have some input, and then also the board could really grade how the improvement has happened year over year, or address situations that may have come up. So to start with, can we address them like in 3 different areas? So you've got the city clerk, you've got the city attorney, and you've got the city manager. Is that okay to talk about them in that area? Currently today, the city clerk had a evaluation that came out that really didn't fit the city clerk's role. I think it mirrors what the city manager's evaluation form is, and so I would like to recommend that we look at updating what that may be on a future, because I didn't evaluate the city clerk this past year. I didn't feel that the form was really fitting, and I wasn't really sure how to best evaluate the city clerk's office. I feel that they're doing a good job, but I also feel that I want to be able to evaluate them in the right way. So I'm not sure if the rest of the board feels that way with what was presented, or if anybody else did a city clerk evaluation for 2017 to current. So with the second one, I know that Vice Mayor Banther helped spearhead the city attorney situation and the situation that it arose to where we got to. I do support that moving forward, and I feel that we probably should have addressed that sooner. And by putting something on the agenda on an annual basis, just to let the city attorney know if there's any issues that we're having as a board, or any frustrations, or maybe we need to communicate better. I feel that that's important. And I spoke to Erica last week, and Tom's out of town, and she said there's not really an evaluation form that's done in other cities, but there is like a verbal communication about annually, sometimes at contract renewal, about the city attorney. So I think that would be a pretty easy one to incorporate. But then, and now looking at the city manager, I want to go back and look at his current agreement that's in place, and I did pull the all of the, how would I say, the written evaluations over the past, I guess it's 9 years or so, and I believe it was Commissioner Slattery at the time, Kikta now, that did one for Mark in 2010, Commissioner Robin Sanger in 2011, Commissioner Banther, now Vice Mayor, in 2014, along with Jeff Larson, that did a written evaluation for the city manager. So this is in the current contract that I wasn't a part of, that the city manager signed along with the current mayor at the time. And it says goals and objectives and performance evaluation. And I'm just going to read through these. It says, on an annual basis, the Board of Commissioners and the employee shall define the goals and the performance objectives which they determine necessary for the proper operation of the city government, and in the plan for the attainment of the Board of Commissioners' policy objectives. They shall further establish a relative priority among those various goals and objectives. And it goes on. Section B says the Board of Commissioners shall review and evaluate the performance of the employee at least once annually by September 1st of each year. and such other times as the board deems appropriate. This evaluation shall be in accordance with a written evaluation process approved by the Board of Commissioners. Again, that's a written evaluation process. And then number C goes on to say the Board of Commissioners shall provide the employee with a written summary of the findings of the evaluation and shall provide the opportunity for the employee to discuss the evaluation with the Board of Commissioners. So with that, I believe I was the only commissioner this year that did a review, and I wanted to encourage the rest of the board to go ahead and do a review with the city manager since we have an election coming up. And it's important that the city commission and the mayor, I believe, express the good things, the bad things, and the you're doing okay things to the city manager, because he's got 5 different bosses that meet with him maybe individually, but he's got to balance those all and weigh them on how to approach them to bring them forward to the board as a whole to make a decision to vote on. And again, I wasn't the one that created this contract. I just came along as a city commissioner. I was elected a year and a half ago. And I just wanted to bring this up and point out that we have an obligation as a board of commissioners to meet with the city manager and set his goals and set the priorities, and then also review them on an annual basis. And in that aspect, I think it's important, and I believe most of us do this, is that we stay in continuing communication. And I would say we set our goals with the city manager, and we've had this conversation, and then we follow up with it on a quarterly basis. Because if he's not understanding, like, I could have an expectation of what the city manager should be doing, but if I'm not in constant communication and a follow-up is documented, he could be going one direction and doing something completely opposite, I think, is ridiculous. But the fact that it's not written down and documented, I don't really have anything to stand on. But then Commissioner Sieber may have a different thought, and if we're not coming together collectively and setting the goals of the city manager along with the budget instead of just the budget, we're not really giving the city manager clear direction. So I just want to bring this up for discussion amongst the 3 positions that report directly to our board, and how we could continue to encourage and build, because I believe Mark, he's got a passion for Tarpon Springs. I know Irene and Michelle, you have a passion for Tarpon Springs, to see Tarpon Springs become a better place. But I just want to follow what our guidelines are saying, and how do we continue the communication and the documentation like we should have. So that's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Carr, thank you for bringing this forward. There are a couple of things that I'd like to bring up is that, first of all, the evaluation, I did evaluation October 18, 2018. And I know that you couldn't find it, but it's there. As a matter of fact, I went to my personal records and I found it and I forwarded to Trish. The other thing I want to tell you is that personally, I can speak for myself that I'm having weekly meetings with Mr. Liqueurs, because this is how we're discussing all projects and issues that we have going on, and I'm sure everybody else is doing that. But I want to let's keep in mind that regardless what evaluation of the city manager is, he's working under the discretion of the BOC. He can have an exceptional evaluation. If we decide that he's no longer needed, or we think they can be replaced, it's up to us to do it. Just keep that in mind. That's part of the contract.
I understand that.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Can I make a clarifying comment?
Yes.
I asked the clerk's office to do some research, and I'm just going off of what the clerks provided to me based on the evaluations that were filed with HR and our secretary. So, thanks.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes. Commissioner.
Thank you. I've also given Mark many written evaluations the 9 years that I've served, so I'm not sure. You said you've only seen one? Because I have copies of them. I keep copies in my house, so I've given him more than one written evaluation as I've served. I just wanted you to know that. But everybody should be accountable. Every employee of this city should be accountable. So, and what we should do, so we should give them a goal, goals and objectives, okay? So if you review their goals and objectives, and after, I'd say, 90 days, you sit back down with that employee and you review to see progress. And if not after that time, then there's other discussions that can be made. So in any job, not just the city, any job, there's always goals and objectives that need to be met or are presented, then met, and if not met, then that's another discussion. So, and everybody should be evaluated. Evaluations should be based on, your raise should be based on your evaluation. And that's how it's done in the private sector, and it should be done, I believe, at the city as well. So, but again, like I said, I have given more than one review to Mark through the years, so I'm not sure who's keeping these evaluations.
In 1 second, let me lift something out if you don't mind. Absolutely. And thank you. Commissioner Kekta, you're absolutely correct. And what is so beneficial to have weekly meetings, and sometimes I have daily, is because you're constantly talking to the employee, and the employee knows exactly what direction to have. By the time you complete his evaluation, he already knows what to expect. That's the difference with what I'm talking about. The other thing I want to, what Commissioner Carr says, I think it's a great idea if we have our secretary or our clerk to put it on our schedule that we do evaluations once a year, let's say in September or August. Let's just say 1 month, so we all do the evaluation together. So we have a record of it. We know exactly that we're doing it a certain time. I think it's a great idea to do that.
Just to be clear, this isn't intended to be a negative situation.
No,
Evaluations aren't negative
do not take it that way.
manner. So
I think it's very positive. I think it's a way that brings everybody together. I think it's a good work session.
yeah, I agree.
That's the way I see it.
But with the discussion though, with the aspect, like we've got our board here that has been with the city manager for the past year.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've got an election coming up, and I wish everyone all the best in the election. We don't know what happens in elections. It would be good, I think, to still have some type of documentation for this past year, and then we set our goals with the city manager after the election happens for the upcoming year, and I think that would be a good recommendation. But obviously, it's a discussion amongst the rest of the board and how you all feel as well. So.
Vice Mayor Panther?
Honestly, I have just an additional question, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be the responsibility of our HR manager to make sure that, but isn't that an HR responsibility? It shouldn't be our secretary, our Tricia's responsibility. I think it's an HR responsibility. They have the evaluations and give them to the department heads, right?
Yeah.
Is that how
your difference is we're charter officials. I think that's where your difference is. The three of us are charter officials.
The reason I'm suggesting our secretary is just to remind it for us. That doesn't mean that she's telling us to do it. She's asking us to, just to tell us, hey, you have something come up. They just put it on the schedule.
From an HR perspective, though, like we still use our HR department for health benefits and other things too. So it's not a terrible thing to have. I mean, someone needs to take responsibility for setting a date and following up with the date, right? So
right.
I think HR makes sense.
I mean, they're doing
aspect.
the other evaluations for all other employees. I mean, what is it to make sure that this is earmarked at the same time as the other employees are getting evaluated? Do they get evaluated all in once a year, like at the same time, or is it based on their term?
It's always August, September.
Right. So we should be doing that at the same time with the clerk and the city manager. Just my thought.
Thank you. And I would encourage, first off, this has bugged me for a long time. We have Robert's Rules of Order on this board. You don't speak unless you're called upon. That's just my opinion. I'm gonna leave that there. Second, Commissioner Carr is correct in that the agreement states we shall do the evaluations for all three chartered employees. But I believe we have to keep that in mind. They are chartered employees. We're not reviewing a simple direct report, an assistant, or like a lineman or something, where you would just take your little matrix and they score 3 here and a 4 there and a 5 there, and then you have the total, and if they get this benchmark, they get their raise, et cetera, et cetera. I did it once for Mark. I only did it once because I thought it was pointless. I mean, I'm in constant communication with Mark daily. I mean, you can ask Mark under oath. I mean, we've had some heated discussions in the sense that he knows where I stand every day with him. He knows what my expectations are of him every single day. And that's the best way that I found to govern. Maybe that's not someone's style. There's nothing wrong with a written evaluation, but I did it one time, and then for the purposes of me and Mark, of Mark knowing my expectations, and as well with the city clerk, I just found it pointless because I'm in constant contact with the city clerk's office, with our city manager. As far as the city attorney, Commissioner Carr brought it up. Yes, I did orchestrate Jay not being with us anymore and mandating that the only 2 attorneys we have are Tom Trask and Erica. So I think that's a review, okay? And, so I think we need to define these are chartered employees. I think, we should review them how we personally see it best to be reviewed. And I would encourage the future board, and I agree with the mayor that it should, whatever is done, if it's a formal written thing, should be done at like the same time of the year, so it can all be captured in one thing, and that's a public document. But I would redo the forms. I would do more of setting goals and objectives and areas for improvement, because the little matrices and the numbers and stuff that's not applicable to a chartered official. So I'm not opposed to the written evals. I just felt how we currently have them, for me, weren't effective in communicating to our chartered officials what I want from them. I felt that my almost daily contact, at least with the city attorney, with the city clerk and the city manager, was the most effective way. So, but I fully agree, we have to set goals and objectives for them to be able to perform. Because then if they fail, even though we have the right to fire at will, you want to at least have a pattern. You don't want to be like Dunedin, where you just dismiss somebody and while we have the ability to, I think you should have a pattern built up. So I would propose for the future boards to just change the actual review form to where though it's more of a writing document, not checking boxes or giving number scores. And I do think that constant communication, verbal especially, is best to relay how you want your chartered officials to act. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Seaver.
Yes, I agree with Vice Mayor Banther. I am in constant communication with our city manager. If I have a problem, a concern, or something that I don't feel is going well, I let him know. I'm not going to wait a year for an evaluation to tell him this. So I feel that, constant contact with our city clerk and our city manager is important. I agree that we maybe should be having an evaluation that shows objectives and goals that we evaluate on. But as far as any concerns, anything that needs to be immediately addressed, or something that I feel has been neglected that I, wanted to talk about or want to be done, I talk to him about and resolve it, and it does get resolved. It's not ignored. So, I also just did a verbal evaluation because I feel like I'm evaluating Mark all the time, every day. And I, waiting for a year to do an evaluation, a lot of time, and many things have happened. So checking off boxes and writing in numbers doesn't work for me either.
Commissioner Carr.
And I just want to clarify, Mark and I talk often also, but I didn't sign this agreement. It's something that we all inherited, and it's pretty clear in his agreement that he needs an annual written agreement, and it's our duty as commissioners and the mayor to provide that on an annual basis, no matter how much communication we have. So I just want to remind us, it's his current agreement that he has with the city of Tarpon Springs. It's not a decision that we actually get to make, that it's going to be verbal or not. It's actually written in the agreement, and it's a contract. So unless we want to change the contract, then it's something that we need to do as city commissioners and the Board of Commission. So I don't have any further comment right now. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to go to public comments on this item. Any public comments?
My name is Costa Vaticiotis, 538 West Cedar Street, Tarpon Springs. I think most of you know me as a former city manager here in town. As far as backup goes, if you go back to my time as city manager, you'll find evaluations that I was subject to. They were not only written evaluations, but they were publicly discussed as well. And not only that, but the public had opportunities to comment concerning my performance. And that lended a sense of transparency to how the city manager performed at that time, and also gave me a good sense of what I needed to do to change to make the commission happy, and also many of the public. I think as far as a contractual issue, I've seen it before. You don't follow a contract and you try and fire the city manager, which I'm not for at all. But if that does happen with a future board with that contract, there could be some significant litigation over the commission not following its own requirements of evaluating them annually. You know, last night's forum, I sat in on that, and the one common thing about the candidates was everybody was talking about what they would like to see done in Tarpon Springs, and this is what my plan is, and things like that. But your plans are only as good as the plan that the city manager develops and how he implements that. And given the recent past, there's been a lot of complaints. I know to some of you there's been a lot of complaints, but there's very little feedback as far as what goes on. All we get was, well, the city manager said somebody else, he didn't know about it, something else happened, you commissioners didn't know about it, and that's the sense of accountability that we get. And as a result, there's a lot of frustration in the city over this. I've talked to or communicate regularly with the city manager on things that I see in the city and on a one-on-one, and he reacts very quickly, takes care of them, and I very much appreciate that. But it's the larger things that happen that tend to bother people, and there's not really any answers for it. It's just like, oh, well, it's just the way it was, and we go along. And I can name several projects off the top of my head, but I don't want to do that this evening. It's important for the public to know how you feel about the city manager, not if I call Commissioner Siebert and ask her privately, well, how do you feel about the city manager? I'd like for Commissioner Siebert to state it publicly how she feels about the city manager and what good things that he's doing and what things that aren't being done so well, that could be improved. I remember the last night Commissioner Jeff Larson's his tenure, he left, and the one thing he gave as far as a recommendation to the city manager was to get along with people better. And that was it. And there's been no feedback of whether that's improved or anything. The one thing I've had one heated conversation with one of the commissioners, and basically I told him I'm just tired of the way the city buildings look, and I don't understand why we keep having to wait for 2 or 3 years for anything to happen, and why they're allowed to get into that condition to begin with. And quite frankly, let me add to that, I'm quite tired of hearing the complaints that I'm being told about the city manager. I don't know whether it's his fault. I don't know whether it's the staff's fault. I really don't know. But it would really be good to know for everybody concerned, so all this can stop, and maybe me personally get a little rest in this. So I think the evaluation is required by contract. I think it's a good thing to be done in writing. I think it ought to be a public record, and I think it ought to be done publicly, as I underwent as city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Hear none? I'd like to bring it back to us for discussion. I'd like to have a workshop at least once a year to discuss the goals and objectives for the year and long-term goals. 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to be very beneficial for the board if we do that, whoever the board happens to be next year. And this way, we all be on the same step, on the same page. That'll be good to give the direction to city manager which direction we want to go. And again, I think it's a good idea, which just set in 1 month, we all do the evaluation at the same time. Any other discussion?
With the city clerk, I think we need to look at another evaluation form. I know, I mean, based on my conversations with Irene, she was asking us for comments and asking us for how they're doing. So I think they're doing a great job, but maybe we look at how we evaluate them as a whole in the form that we use. So I'm not sure if we could ask the clerk to see if she has a form that we could utilize that might be better, or what the best approach would be. So would there be any recommendations the mayor?
I don't know if Michelle can help us with that, but I remember there was a different form a few years back, and we changed that because she didn't have all the questions necessary for evaluations. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So the form that we got now, it's the updated one.
Yes.
Okay.
So we can always look at that. There's always room for improvement, that's for sure.
I think we should look at it. And if we could ask the city clerk's office, excuse me, if there's a better form that we could utilize that could help them out as a whole with their department. And
I'd like to ask our human resources through Mr. Licorice to take a look and see what the other cities are using and see if we can get something that's compatible and that provides all the information that we need to have. All right.
Can I make another comment?
Sure.
You know, it's I do want to say thanks to the city manager because I know you have a passion for Tarpon Springs, growing up here and seeing Tarpon Springs continue to grow. And I know you've got a lot of different people coming at you in different directions, and it could be you've got to have pretty thick skin, obviously, being in the city manager's position. So I do want to say thanks for your work and what you're doing because we don't always see eye to eye on all items, and I don't expect all commissioners to get along and the public agree with everything that each one of us do based on the different opinions that happen. So I do just want to say thanks for working with us, and I know you probably don't get enough credit for the things that do happen around Tarpon Springs. And again, I do think it's good that we follow up, though, and so thanks again for your work with us.
I'm sure it's not easy to have 5 bosses, right? Listen to all 5 of us.
No, not easy.
Yeah. Mr. Licorice, you want to comment?
I don't have any comment. You're the 5 bosses. How you decide to do it is your choice. So, I mean, I think the contract is pretty clear. You can read the part about evaluating stuff, but it's very clear clause in there about me being at will. So I think it's very clear what you have to do in the next meeting. Again, you could give me all 5s in the next meeting. I could be gone, or you could give me nothing and I could be gone. Very clear in that contract. The city attorney at that time, I think Mr. Hubbard put in there and stuff, an at-will employee. So again, it's up to you, you know, any way you want to do it, that's the way we do it. Again, a lot of them preferred, some, you know, commissioners, like the new commissioner coming on, Mr. Harpani, I mean, he preferred like you, and all 6 of his were verbal and constant, you know, monthly, daily, sometimes weekly like yours, and that was his preference. But again, I work for you 5, so however you all 5 decide to do it, what form you decide to use, you know, that's your choice, and I'll do whatever you decide as the 5 bosses.
Could I say something? I think maybe we should consider a different evaluation for our city manager other than the one that we have, because, you know, it just maybe, I don't know if the board can come up with one that they feel relevant to the city manager, just like a relevant evaluation for our city clerk, because I think the one that we have now is not good.
I don't like the number system on evaluation. I do like the put a comment below it, because with the comments below, it shows the things that he's doing well or the things that he needs to be improved on. And that's a very good explanation, in my opinion. And I believe this is what Vice Mayor mentioned earlier, right?
Yep, that's what I've been saying from day one.
Yes.
I just, I want to state that, the form that we currently use, really, I don't like it. Like the rest of us, it's a number system. It just doesn't make sense. I think that we should ask HR to go out to other cities and see what kind of form they're using to evaluate their city manager. The one that I have for the city clerk is real basic. It's just, right? And you just
changed it to
yeah.
that. Yeah.
And I think that's fine. I think that's great. You just a summary. You summarize how you feel that if they're meeting their expectations, how they're exceeding in their job and whatnot, and if you have any additional expectations of them. I mean, it's just a summary. So I think that's a real simple one. It's not this number thing. It's just this one that we have now is just really difficult. It's not difficult. It just doesn't make too much sense. I think there's got to be a better form out there, and I'm sure HR can find us one. Thank you.
If you all agree, I think it's a great idea. Take a look and see. We'll get it updated. And I'd still like to see that whoever happens to be the new board, after the election, to have a workshop to discuss about goals and objectives. So the city manager will have a direction on which way we want to go for the year and for the future. You all agree with that? Yes.
I agree with that. I don't think it should be done at a regular commission meeting. It should be at a workshop.
A workshop.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that's a great idea. And so we're all on the same page. And again, his contract says a written evaluation. It does not say that we have to sit here and discuss his evaluation in public. So we wouldn't be following the contract if we did that. So I've sat here when I had to fire a city manager, as she sat here. That was not fun. And I don't want to have to ever do that again. So we can have a work session. Anybody can sit in on our work sessions. It's just that they can't speak. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I think that's the proper format. Thank you.
Unless you invite some experts to come speak. We can do that too, if we have to.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussions? No? Well, that concludes the agenda tonight, and we're gonna go to staff comment. Chief?
Well, thank you, Mayor.
Congratulations again.
Yes, thank you. Well, last week, some of you were able to make the journey with us to St. Augustine. TSPD went before the State Accreditation Commission. We got reaccredited for another 3 years. And I'm so proud of the men and women of the department, because we were basically almost flawless in our evaluation, which is almost unheard of. And that's just the truth. It's not a sham. It's the real deal. When you go up there, you got to prove that you're following best practices, and they scrutinize you every which way but loose. So we did really well, and I want to thank the mayor, the vice mayor, Commissioner Sieber, our city manager came up with us, and again, going before the commission was and getting that report was really makes me proud to be chief and lead the men and women of this department. So thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney, thank you for attending the meeting with us tonight.
It's always my pleasure.
Any comment?
No comments here.
Mr. Licorice?
Just to follow up on the chief, we remember when we were there 3 years ago in the middle of nowhere, when we went in the middle of the state, wherever that was, to do one. We got comments then about the representation that there, and all of you that was there saw some of the people just had an officer or didn't even have the chief there and had two of them there. We've always had the commissioners who've been available to go. 1 year we had members of some board members, the budget advisory board last time.
Yeah, budget advisory went.
So they know that Tarpon's serious about it. To go through that thing without blemishes, the pages and pages to go without blemishes, because it's pretty easy not easy, but it's much easier to get accredited. It's a lot harder to keep it. As you saw, the ones who went up there saw some of those agencies that were having problems keeping it. Getting it's one thing. Getting is a big achievement, but keeping it is something else, and to keep it without comments, without anything going on.
Second time around, too.
Second time around, you know, it was just a great accomplishment. And again, like we do everywhere. I mean, we are just known when we do things the right way. When we come out with everybody who can be there. And that's just how we've been known, you know, the past 10 years and brought that about. So, and believe me, those people up there who are involved all over the state, they see that from us, and that's the kind of community. So,
Well, the interesting thing, too, is Frank is in high demand. Our accreditation manager, they want him everywhere because he's so good at it. You know, so kudos to him, obviously.
That's all.
Michelle?
No comment.
No comment? Thank you for attending the meeting tonight.
It's been fun.
Vice Mayor Bento.
Well, the chief said it was almost flawless. It was flawless as far as what I saw the commission say. And for some agencies, they would list the corrective items, but instead of listing anything, because we had no corrective items, they asked the chief to explain the Cops and Kids program, and the whole board was very impressed by that. So, and I saw no other agency that I was asked to explain something good. So I think we were the best ones there. Happy birthday to Commissioner Carr. I'll eat my cupcakes tomorrow. Thank you.
Oh yes, I forgot.
gluten-free.
There are cupcakes at the counter over here for Commissioner Carr's birthday.
Thank you, Michelle.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes, I was, very proud of you guys and honored to be there. There weren't too many people who got reaccredited, for the second time. And in 3 years, it'll be your third time. So unfortunately, I won't be here anymore, but I know that you guys can do it again. Frank, did do a great job and worked hard. It's an extra duty, and I commend him for that and for your leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kickner.
Thank you. I just, I wanted to congratulate the police department on the reaccreditation. I know it's a very big deal. And I did attend at the safety building when the group came in and was doing the evaluation that day, and we were very, very well prepared, organized.
Static display, right.
Yes, I think that was, they did a great job. Staff did a great job. Your people did a great job getting ready for the evaluation. And I could see how impressed that the people that were evaluating, how impressed they were with each person that they spoke to. Of course, with Tommy with the dog, and then Trill out there, and Trill can impress everybody. So he's somebody we want on our side. But all of them, the whole team did a great job. So please thank them for me.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks. I love celebrating birthdays. Thank you.
At 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Again, I want to congratulate you, Chief, and your staff and everything you've done. I also want to bring up I did in one, I believe the January or December meeting, I volunteered to be the city's representative on the Forward Pinellas, and I've come to realize that it's more of a commitment than I could commit with my professional life, that I can't break loose as I hoped to. So I'm going to have to resign because I haven't been able to make the first two meetings. And I feel that it would be more appropriate to see if we had someone else on the board that could sit on that board. I think it's an important board. I struggle with it because I only have a limited amount of vacation days at my current job, and it would end up being like 6 vacation days a year, and it's over half of my vacation days for this board. So I'm going to have to resign from the board. I don't know if we want to see, Mark, maybe we could talk about what the next steps are from that. It's with regret that, I really want to be a part of it. I think it's an important board for Tarpon Springs to be a part of. There's a lot of great things that happen on there. It's just the time of day that it meets is tough for me to get there. If it was later in the day and late afternoon or in the evening, I could do it without a problem. But with my schedule, I just can't do it. So we'll talk probably tomorrow about it and see what the next steps would be then. other than that, I'm proud of a lot of the things that Tarpon Springs has going on throughout the city. I know we've got a lot of snowbirds here, so there's a lot of extra traffic on our roads. But it's a good reminder that we don't pay state income taxes at all based on them visiting here. So I hope the businesses are doing well with our visitors and that they're spending their money here locally. Thanks.
Thank you, and happy birthday to you. Thank you. Yeah. Chief, congratulations again, and we are very proud of every police officer that we have in Tarpon Springs. I am very grateful for the work that they do and the safety they provide to our people here.
Thank you, Mayor.
I have several announcements to make. March 1st, we have the First Friday event from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Tarpon Avenue. Thursday, March 7th, we have the Sunset Beach concert from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. This is a free event as well. March 9th to Sunday, March 10th, we have the Fine Arts Festival at the Bayou at the Creek Park. This is an event that it begins from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And Saturday, March 16th is the Sunset Beach cleanup from 10 a.m. till noon, and I hope everybody will be able to make it. Again, thank you all, and I want to thank the St. Petersburg students for staying here so late to watch the meeting and be part of it. Thank you for your ideas. Well, that concludes our meeting tonight, and it's adjourned at 9:45 p.m.